pure from the pests, obeying contradictory thoughts. Our unification as a force is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
I used to trust the media to tell me the truth. That's the truth. But now I've seen the chaos everywhere I look. Who do you trust when everyone's a crook? Revolution coming, revolution coming, yeah.
Normal broadcasting will now be discontinued for an indefinite period. I repeat, normal broadcasting will be discontinued for an indefinite period.
Today, the Federal Communications Commission empowers America's new media elite with unacceptable levels of influence over the ideas and information upon which our society and our democracy depend.
Normal broadcasting will now be discontinued for an indefinite period. I repeat, normal broadcasting will be discontinued for an indefinite period.
What does the future hold in store for us? To get a glimpse of that future, Army-Navy Screen Magazine presents a new department. Tomorrow, previewing our post-war world.
Let's take a look at what is actually happening now. 9 experimental telecasting studios are already operating, with pre-war equipment and skeleton staffs. While the electronic industry is busy finishing its war job, a handful of people, girls, ex-vets, older men, are keeping the television field alive, experimenting, ironing out kinks, but proving that television will definitely be part of American life when the go-ahead comes. Sight teamed up with sound to bring the world to your easy chair. Telecasting studios will be a combination of Broadway and Hollywood, and you'll get the best of both for the price of your television set and a few cents worth of electricity.
As a public service, TV Free Baltimore provides a digital soapbox for those the mainstream media ignores. The opinions expressed in this live stream are not necessarily those of the owners, management, or underwriters of TV Free Baltimore. Furthermore, TV Free Baltimore streams hyper-local content focusing on politics and entertainment in the Baltimore viewing area.
Streaming live from the Paul and Catherine Ranke Memorial Studio, this is TV Free Baltimore. Support for TV Free Baltimore comes from viewers like you. Become a TV Free Baltimore member by visiting patreon.com/TVFreeBaltimore.
Welcome to TV Free's live stream for Saturday, June the 2nd, 2018. With Maryland's primary moving ever so closer, the local media's left-wing political bias is easy to see. Let's take a look at WYPR's Midday with Tom Hall and their feature, Conversations with the Candidates. Their webpage begins with an interview of a Democrat running for Baltimore's state's attorney. Then there's an interview with another Democrat for the city's state's attorney's office. Here's a Democrat for governor. Then an interview with Dutch Ruppersberger, an incumbent Democrat in the United States Congress. And here we have another Democrat running for governor, and then 2 more Democrats running for state senate. And then Kevin Cabinets, another Democrat who was running for governor before he passed away, and then another Democrat running for governor, and yet another Democrat, and yet another Democrat, and another Democrat, and another Democrat, and another Democrat. Oh, wait a minute. Here's a Republican. Anyway, as of June the 2nd, 2018, Midday posted interviews with 17 Democrats but only one Republican. Any reasonable person would see this for what it is: liberal biased reporting and media censorship. Censorship in not allowing Republicans or libertarians a voice. Now, does this type of liberal bias go beyond Midday? Of course it does. Tom Hall's guest on 529 is Sean Yos, who is the Baltimore editor of the Afro-American newspaper, which is certainly an outlet for Afrocentric left-wing news. If you dig a little deeper, you'll discover Sean Yos co-hosts the WYPR podcast Truth and Reconciliation. The other co-host of the show, Tia Graham and Stephen Janis, work for the Real News Network, which in my opinion is nothing more than a neo-communist propaganda website, where Mark Steiner now has a show. And one familiar with Mark Steiner knows he's a liberal left-wing advocate. To bring us full circle, watch this.
Sean and I are going to be part of a panel tonight that includes Mark Steiner of the Center for Emerging Media and the activist Catalina Bird. It's called Moving from Protest to Policy, Making Advocacy Count. It's being presented by the Associated Black Charities. We're going to talk about the Maryland General Assembly session that's just concluded, what passed, what stalled. That starts at 6 o'clock tonight at the University of Maryland School of Social Work.
Moving from protest to policy, making advocacy count. In my mind, that makes it clear that those mentioned are left-wing advocates hiding behind microphone flags and calling themselves journalists. With that said, tonight's stream will only have one Maryland politics show, and this stream will look like TV Free Baltimore will look like moving forward. The program during the stream will be the following: one episode of Books and Authors, one episode of Maryland Politics, which will be followed by TV Free Baltimore's movie reviews. Then there'll be one episode of The Paul Stefan Show. And then we're going to give you 2 episodes of History at Risk, which explores local Maryland history. Then that'll be followed by a short little show called Baltimore Memories. And our last show of the evening will be Gunhild Carling Live. And of course, there'll be surprises between all these shows. Enjoy.
Hi, this is Cindy Williams, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
This is Gunhild Carling, and you are watching TV Free Baltimore. You are not watching. You have to watch TV Free Baltimore.
This is my jump shot.
Trash ball, I need pay. Everybody wins, let me show you how to play. When you pick up some trash, pretend it's a ball, and then you throw it in the bucket, you're playing a trash ball. A jump shot hook, you gotta put it away. We're gonna play that trash ball every day.
Come on, Baltimore, play ball and keep it clean.
Welcome to TV Free Baltimore's Books and Authors.
Hello, this is Paul Stefan, and this is another edition of Books and Authors here at TV Free Baltimore. And this evening, our guest is author Megan Morgan. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, thank you.
I want to find out a little bit about you. Give us a little background, your biographical sort of background. I got you, sort of where you are today.
Right now, I'm living in Maryland after having sort of traveled around the country.
Right.
I've lived before this in South Carolina and Washington State, which I loved. Before that, I grew up in West Virginia. And right now I'm working on wrapping up and getting ready for publication my first novel.
That's
I've
exciting.
Been, yes, working on for a long time. I've been a writer basically my entire life.
Oh, you have. I was going to wonder where it
Yeah.
started from.
No, in kindergarten, I wrote, this one really huge long sentence about a train going through a tunnel, and it's basically hasn't stopped since then. It got really serious in junior high. I started writing stories for my friends.
Oh.
And since then, I've been writing about like a novel's worth a year.
Wow.
Yeah, and progressively getting more serious as I go. And so this has definitely been a lifelong dream of mine to get a book.
Interesting. From childhood on up.
Yeah.
And I think it might carry on in the next generation.
Yes.
Didn't you say Little Miss is doing that sort of stuff too?
Yeah, it's incredible. My daughter loves telling stories. She writes her own sort of like little books with like a front cover and like a little story and illustrations and everything. Yeah.
So maybe there's a writing gene. I don't know.
I think there might be some kind of a storytelling gene or something. There's something
It has
there.
to be.
Yeah.
So, but you're saying you're like a lot of writers, sounds like you have maybe a lot of manuscripts in a drawer somewhere that will never see the light of day kind of a thing.
Yeah, I would say that at least, 60 to 75% of what you write never gets out at all. You kind of have to skim off the top and keep the good stuff. Yeah.
Right. So that's what I was going to ask you. Where did the love of writing come from? So you said it started young, but was there anybody in your family, like say there was mom, dad, granddad, anybody who was like maybe an oral storyteller, or they read to you when you were 2 or 3 years old, or where did this whole idea of maybe you putting imagination on paper come from?
I think that a lot of like my own drive to make books has very much been internal. But my mom, when I was really young, we took every weekend trips to the library.
Oh, okay.
And so I'd say definitely my interest in books and in having a voracious appetite for them started, I'd say, with her and with trips to the library. I think I read my way through the entire old school Nancy Drew book series when I was in like first grade or something. Yeah.
Precocious reader.
Yes.
It seems like. But that's part of what I was going to get to too.
Yeah.
Who were some of your favorite authors and your favorite books? What kind of authors and books influenced you?
I used to read a lot of mysteries when I was very young, and so I've always enjoyed stuff like that. I, of course, grew up reading a lot of Harry Potter, and so, J.K. Rowling has definitely been a major influence. I also enjoy a lot of science fiction and fantasy. Those are definitely like my genres of choice. And I lean more towards science fiction, I think, for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it seems to me there's also maybe influence not just from books, but also films for you, and especially maybe Star Wars or the Star Wars series?
Yes. Star Wars is... I'm a huge geek, and I would say that the explosion of my geekiness is centered in Star Wars, which I first really connected with when I was in the 3rd grade. My sister brought the cassette tapes home from a friend's house, and I was immediately hooked. And I've sort of been, super interested in Star Wars ever since. It was a big deal, a big inspiration to me.
Well, it's interesting because of the filmmakers that I've had in here and interviewed, a lot of them say for them, movies like Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, things like that, they were influential to their being pushed maybe to wanting to be the filmmakers.
Yeah, I think that Star Wars in particular sort of has this epicness to it that I think really captures a lot of people, and sort of following the characters and stuff. And also, it has an organic feeling to it, and a lively energy that a lot of other things don't have.
Because I know in the past, we just had those few films, and we had to wait forever for the next one to come out. And then there was a hiatus of films, and now it seems to be an explosion of Star Wars films, almost like Disney is guaranteeing one a year.
Yes.
But they're sort of like, a lot of them are like backstory, like what happened before. Like the next one's going to be the young Han Solo.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Origins, kind of.
It's interesting to see the expansion of the universe. There's always some debate as to, whether or not all of the new content is of the same quality as, what we had before. I think that the originals are impossible to recapture. And to a certain extent, I think that's okay, because it's a mythology, and it kind of stands alone.
So you're saying beyond that, and that's probably, again, why you're leaning towards sci-fi,
Yeah.
but people like J.K. Rowling influence your writing?
I would say that J.K. Rowling is a big influence as far as like the world that she created, and sort of the degree to which she made something that brought people in, that allowed people to sort of fill in the world themselves and actively participate in it. And I think that's something that like Harry Potter and Star Wars have in common, is that they sort of created a world, and then they let other people sort of explore it and create their own side stories and stuff to it.
So is that what you intend to do with your writing as well?
I definitely look at that as, there are things happening in the world, both before and after, and in conjunction with the storyline that I have, that aren't fully explored in the book. I think that having that kind of, those spaces where there's other stuff going on and it's hinted at is really important. Yeah, in creating something that feels real.
Now, do you see even, I got a flash, you can see if you go with me on it, that J.K. Rowling could almost be like a role model for you? Because I remember when she started, she had no money.
Yeah.
She was a single mom with a daughter
Yeah.
who wrote a book.
Most definitely, like as far as J.K. Rowling's personal story, she's absolutely been someone who's been an inspiration to me, because she talked a lot about how, she had this young child who she was caring for by herself. She would go to cafes, and other people would like help watch her kids while she got out that first draft to Harry Potter. And then after that, she faced a lot of challenges as far as getting her novels out. It wasn't an easy journey. It didn't just happen for her. She
Right.
had to work very hard, and at the same time had, a family and things. So yes, absolutely. As far as her personal story, she's someone who I look to, and I, often think to myself, okay, like, how hard did she have to fight to get there? And so, then how hard do I have to be willing to fight? And to what degree do I have to be willing to not give up? That's a huge part of it, for sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Now, did you have, beyond those influences, did you have any mentors?
I really haven't had a lot of mentors until pretty recently. I went to college and got an English degree, and so I would say that, at that point, as far as my professors and stuff, I definitely had people who, were there helping and influencing me. But I feel like more recently, as I've gotten more and more involved in sort of the more arts community, now has been a time, and part of the reason why I'm getting my book out now is because I've encountered people who have experience with independently, putting their material out into the world. And so that's been a big deal to me, of late, is finding those people who've made that journey and connecting with them, and not only taking inspiration from them, but also finding out the nitty-gritty mechanics of how it's done. And those people are rare. There aren't a lot of people who independently, get their work out into the world, because it takes a lot of self-motivation and drive to do it.
Well, I know that there are a lot of writers in the books that I read, because I'm a big reader too, is that they usually have, a lot of them have support groups, in the sense that it's a group of writers who get together and they talk about the struggles, and they talk about critiquing each other's drafts and everything else. And so you then have, I'm not really alone out there. And I don't know if you have a support system like that yet.
I don't have a writers group specifically. I know a lot of people do. I've sort of struggled, I think, to find a specific writers group that I fit in with. It takes a lot of, you sort of have to be in with people who have the same goals and the same level of motivation that you do. I've been involved in a lot where, people wanted to come in and kind of for fun, swap stories and things, and I've always been more serious. I don't just want to do this for fun. I want to get my work out into the world, because I have stories that I want to tell. The point of writing for me ultimately is communicating with other people, and so I think without that final step of getting something out there, there's still definitely point to it, but to me that is a necessary part of the journey.
Now, do you have any previous writings that have actually been published?
No, I don't currently, other than on my blog. I do post regularly. I won a couple of competitions in college. But since then, I've been very focused on sort of honing my craft and getting my first novel ready for publication.
And then when you said at the beginning of the interview about writing your whole life, why now, in a sense of saying, you've gone through this whole period of your lifetime, saying, now is when I'm trying to push to get a book published, and not 5 years ago or 3 years ago?
I think that for a long time, I sort of felt like I wasn't ready. I was sort of expecting, I guess, to a certain extent, for the audience to come to me. And I think very recently I've recognized that I have to be willing to put myself out there. And so that's been a huge part of it, for sure.
Well, that's good. Now, it's known, I know, that writing, is a discipline.
Yes, it is.
What has writing taught you about yourself?
Oh, that's a good question, because I think that actually on the personal level, I think that we face a lot of challenges when we take on writing something large like a novel. We have to learn not only how to, make a habit of writing and to, write in spite of the fact that maybe we don't want to. But I think that we face a lot of things in the writing of something independently by ourselves that you don't otherwise. And it is a learning process of, okay, how do I get myself to do this? And not only finish something, but then after that, edit it, and then have sort of the strength of will to turn it into something that someone else wants to read. Because there's always that moment when you finish the first draft, I think, for me anyway, and you read it and you're like, this is awful. And so you really have to learn not just self-discipline, but you also have to learn how to take something that could genuinely be awful, sort of shape it into something that is great. Because there are always, good parts of it. And so I think that, you definitely have to learn how to sort of find those good things, pull them out, and then, shape something around it. it's a very huge, very personal, I think, journey, for sure.
Now, the other, I guess, cliche, but it's true, is they say, write what you know.
Yes.
And in your writing, how does that apply? Obviously, you're not writing about space people who are altered. No, that's not in your personal experience. But I'm just saying that what do you think that what do you bring to writing from your life experience?
A huge motivating factor for me as a writer has always been, I grew up reading science fiction and fantasy, and a lot of the primary characters in those genres tend to be male. And so I sort of grew up having to mentally overwrite my own experiences onto that sort of structure. You sort of learn to adapt your mind to the fact that every single main character that you encounter in those genres, with a few exceptions, are going to be guys. And so a huge motivating factor for me, and where a lot of my personal experience comes to what I write, is that I want to create female characters in those roles where you have typically seen male characters, because that was something that I craved when I was younger. It was something that I needed to see, and which was so very rarely there. And so it's something that really drives me, is to get those kinds of powerful, decisive female characters into those kinds of stories, because I think it really impacts the way people think about themselves and the way people see the world. And just on a more general level, I think that even if you're writing science fiction and fantasy, they provide a kind of lens on the real world. And I think each genre sort of does that in a different way. But just because there are spaceships and swords and stuff like that doesn't mean that they aren't sort of examining the issues that people face every day. Yeah. So I think that a lot of sort of, people and feelings come out on the page, no matter what the genre is.
Well, luckily, really, for your daughter's generation, I can think of my head, and in movies and in books, there have been female heroes, like The Hunger Games, the Divergence series, Wonder Woman, the new Wonder Woman.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of positive, female role models in fantasy and science fiction now for young women.
It has expanded, and it has grown, and it has been really encouraging to see for someone like me who wanted that kind of stuff for so long. I think that there's more that can be done, but it's really exciting. I think that there has to be a broad spectrum, and I think that that's why it's so important that we see more and more, is because women are just as complex as men are, and you have women who are, you would consider strong and aggressive and masculine, and there are also women who are very feminine, and you have women who fall all across the spectrum of that, and so I think that the more that we see, the more complexity that we get, and so that's a really big deal.
It's good because, a lot of people, the stereotypes say, our little girls are growing up and their role models are the Disney princesses. And they have to have other role models besides Disney princesses.
Although my daughter does love a good Disney princess.
She does.
And the Disney princesses, I think, are getting more and more complex these days, too. Like, my daughter loves Moana. And Moana is an awesome female character. She's a Disney princess, but she's still pretty amazing.
And you blogged about her.
I did, yeah.
But anyway, where did the idea from this book come from?
Almost everything I write is sort of a combination of a great many things. It's sort of a reverse Star Wars, I guess, in that Star Wars is sort of a lot of fantasy elements that are wrapped up in sort of a science fiction kind of coding, whereas what I have is more of like the core elements of it are science fiction, and it has sort of fantasy elements wrapped around it. As far as inspiration, I think that that's like so hard to pin down for so many people, just because for me anyway, it's almost always a lot of things.
Okay.
Yeah, I sort of gather things and sort of meld them all together and see what comes out.
Well, of course, and then we want to tell people that the book is called Altered Wake.
Yes, it's called The Altered Wake.
The Altered Wake.
Yeah.
And your main character is Cameron.
Correct,
And,
yes.
And she's one of these people. We'll get you to talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
But one of the things you said in the blog was interesting. I think you said Stephen King said something about, a book should start with a good story, and that you, at least with this book, and maybe usually your method is you start with a character.
Yeah. I love Stephen King, and he has lots of great advice, but every writer approaches sort of writing very differently. And for me, I almost always start with the characters, and the characters sort of create the story. And so for me, I'd say, yeah, I approach things a little bit differently, but at the same time, I allow the characters that I create to find the story. I don't start writing with a specific end in mind. And I think that Stephen King would argue for that approach too. I think that he considers the finding of the story to be an organic sort of process. He brings things up to the surface, that he himself wasn't aware of until he started working on it. He describes it as, I think, like uncovering fossils. And so even though I start with, the characters first and the story sort of follows them, it's still a similar process in the sense that I don't have a set ending in mind when I get started. I sort of let it happen as it wants to.
Well, I've heard that a lot, that sometimes for some authors, once they have their characters, they say the characters start writing the book.
Yes.
Yes. It's almost like they're even talking to the author to say, this is a situation I want to be on, this feels right, this doesn't feel right. It's almost like a psychic connection with these imaginary people.
Yeah, it absolutely can happen. I've more than once had an idea in mind for what a character was going to do, and you have a really good character when you hit a critical moment and they sort of turn around and look at you as the author and they go, I'm not doing that. You go, well, you just messed up all my plans.
Well, there you go. Now, this book, because we want people obviously to read it, we want it to be a success and sell lots of copies. Tell everybody a little bit about the book, the plot, without giving it such a way that say, oh, she told us we're not going to read it. But it tantalize our audience with telling what the book's about.
Yeah. It starts with a character, Cameron Cardell, and she's a sentinel, which is a type of soldier in the world that she lives in. And these powers start showing up in the world around her. Her first experience with it is when one of her closest friends and a fellow sentinel reveals that she can read minds. And this friend very quickly becomes an enemy, and it has a lot to do with these abilities that she has. And so Cameron's mission becomes not only fulfilling her duties, but also discovering where these powers are coming from and what they mean to her personal identity. She goes on a really interesting, difficult journey that requires her to, choose between her duties as a sentinel and her friendship, and also, it challenges her personal identity.
Okay, but not obviously seeing the end of the book, you sent me a few chapters. Is this something that you envision as the first of the series, or?
Yes.
You do?
This is the first draft of the second book is already written. And there's a third/fourth in mind. It depends on how much material is there once I start writing. But yeah, this is the sort of initiating chapter in a series.
Okay. Did you find yourself an editor or a publisher?
I had a copy editor, and I've made the decision to self-publish, and there have been a lot of reasons for that. I think just yesterday on Twitter, which there are a ton of authors and agents and publishers, it was someone who had written a book, they got an agent, and it took them 6 years from the time they had an agent to get a publisher. So even if you do land an agent, it can still be a time-consuming process, and it can also fall through. There are plenty of writers out there who land an agent but then never get a book deal. And so I sort of wanted to take the process into my own hands, because I have more that I want to write. I have more ideas, and while it would be nice, I guess, to have the backup of a traditional publisher, there are, in this day and age, there are so many of the things that you can take on yourself, and you can create something that is still 100% a valid book, if you're willing to put the work and the effort into it, and you don't have to give up your ability to sort of call the shots creatively, and you also have control of marketing and getting your voice out there. You aren't as reliant on someone else to do that, which sometimes it doesn't happen.
So without, let's say, a big publishing house behind you, how are you going to be able to successfully market your book?
A lot of the big publishing houses sort of leave it in the hands of the author anyway. So there are a lot of resources nowadays with social media. There are blogs, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, which I'm on, and then there are places like this where I get to talk to you and talk about what I do. And so there's definitely, if you're willing to go out there and reach out and not just do things like this, but also create your own events and stuff, it is possible to connect with a community. And then that's really what getting a book out there is about, is creating a community around it that cares and can be passionate about what you're doing.
Well, good. I could see you going to sci-fi conventions.
Yeah, for sure. I have a lot of friends who do a lot of science fiction cons, and that's definitely part of my plan.
Good.
Yeah.
That'd be terrific for you. Because mostly everybody I see, some authors who say, "Oh well, you can find my book on Amazon."
Yeah,
it's always like that. I don't know if your book would eventually get, or how you even get a book on Amazon, but
yes, I'm planning on releasing on a lot of platforms. There will be all the digital stuff on Amazon and Nook and Kindle and everything like that. But also it's more and more accessible to do print copies independently. So yeah, I definitely plan on, taking the book out there and getting physical copies of it in front of people.
And get people to get your autograph on the
yes,
book.
Yes, I will sign books.
Get up on your on your penmanship.
Yeah.
Because you already told us then a little bit about your future, because you've got 2 and 3 and 4 ready, or getting them ready. Now, is there a publishing date for this book, or is there any firm date that's a publishing date for
I don't
this
have
book?
a specific day, but I plan to have it out late summer. Yeah, so definitely either July or August. So yeah, I'm doing all the finishing touches on it now. It's
Terrific.
been edited. The book cover is almost complete.
Okay.
And then after that, there are really just a couple more steps as far as getting it out. Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, we want to have you back
Yes, I
to
would
hear
love
about
to come
that
back.
book and
Yeah.
other books, and you
For
can be
sure.
a friend of our station that way, and
Definitely.
talk about the book, and for people can find it and find you. This is where we
Yes.
say, look into the camera there
Hello.
and tell them how to find you, your contact
Right.
information.
I'm on Facebook. My name is Megan Morgan. I also have an author page, and that is Bright Ink Writes. You can find me on WordPress. My website is Bright Ink Writes, and I do a lot of blogging there. And I'm also on Twitter, M3 Writes. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, we're very happy to have had you here.
Well, thank you very much. It was great to be here, and I really appreciate you having me on.
No problem. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
You're
It was
welcome.
nice.
Okay, folks. Well, we're done again. That was another edition, get the joke there, of the Books and Authors series with Megan Morgan. And don't forget to look for that book when it comes out later this summer. It'll be good beach reading for you, I think. So until the next time, this is Paul Stefan, and good night.
You're watching Books and Authors on TV Free Baltimore.
In all of freedom's history, there has never been an organization quite like the National Rifle Association of America. No other people are so alert, so vigilant, so unafraid to take a stand and go out and fight for what's good and right. We, the people of the National Rifle Association, represent the very best of America's strength and of America's character.
This is Governor Ehrlich. You're watching TV Free Baltimore.
Hi, I'm Kathy Garver, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
You're watching TV Free Baltimore.
Hi, this is Jerry Rochelle, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
I'm Kreskin. Now, of course, you know me as the amazing Kreskin. And guess what? I can see it in your mind. I predict you're going to be watching.
I run an educational media company. We produce 5-minute videos about different topics we believe that the world should be aware of. We produce videos about history, political science, just anything that we believe would make a person whole and more knowledgeable and savvy in this world.
PragerU says 60% of their audience is under 35. About 35 PragerU videos are currently restricted.
When we first realized that our videos were being restricted, there were about 15 videos that were restricted, and that was a year and a half ago. And since then, not only has the issue not been resolved, there's actually been 20 more videos restricted, and currently it's closer to 40 videos that are being restricted. And after nothing really happening for weeks and weeks, we kept pressing them, and then they eventually told us, well, after reviewing your videos, we determined they're not appropriate for a young audience, which was really troubling to us at PragerU, because if you've seen any of our videos, they're very educational and they're very appropriate for a young audience.
They have placed our videos on their restricted list. That means that it can't be viewed in libraries, in schools, or any home that filters out pornography, for example. Cannot be seen in any of those places.
Our videos are as innocent as exists on the internet. 4 Pulitzer Prize winners, professors from Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Yale, and they still said inappropriate, but we still don't understand why.
You think when you Google something, everything on that subject comes up. I mean, it's in their mission statement. They say we organize the information of the world and make it universally accessible to all. They don't do that because they don't make ours accessible.
When I learned YouTube had been denying access to its platform to PragerU's videos, I said, I think the only way you're going to get honest answers and gain the access that the First Amendment would require is if, in fact, you start getting people through discovery in a lawsuit.
I almost feel like we're being bullied because being silenced is such a frustrating feeling. This is not just about PragerU being silenced. This is about another point of view that is being silenced. Tomorrow it's going to be your point of view that's being silenced.
Is Google the one who gets to decide what everybody gets to watch?
We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well.
If you want change, if you want these streets cleaned up, if you want this heroin really attacked and taken care of, if you want this Section 8 housing abolished or reduced, if you want jobs coming to this county, if you want to see a better education system that's accountable to students and to the parents, if you want to see real change, and if you want to see this county to become the best county in the United States of America, then I'm your guy.
4 years ago, people were fleeing Maryland. 43 tax hikes, even taxing the rain. 100,000 jobs lost. So we elected Larry Hogan. $1.2 billion in tax, toll, and fee relief. Highest ever funding for schools. Healthiest bay in a generation. Maryland's back. When we needed a leader, Hogan was there. And when he needed us, we returned the favor. Larry Hogan, changing Maryland.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Welcome back to another episode of Maryland Politics here at TV Free Studios in Lansdowne. I'm your host, Derek Sterling, and my guest this evening is Dave Bishop, Libertarian. How you doing today, Mr. Bishop?
Good, Derek.
Good,
Great to be
good,
here.
good,
Thanks.
Good. I always come out the gate with a powerful question to my guests, especially being a libertarian, where libertarians are on the move right now, pretty much being consumed by Democrats and Republicans. But just tell our audience, tell my audience, what makes you a better candidate than Anthony Brown? Is that the proper way to present that question?
Basically, there's a few things that separate me from Anthony Brown and even the Republican candidate. That one being, I'm not a career politician. I've been in small business since I got out of the Marine Corps in 2004, except for a short stint that I worked for Office Depot. But other than that, I've been running and managing and working in small business. Exactly. So I have worked for a corporation, and that helped me kind of establish that small business really is what makes America work overall. So I'm not a career politician. I haven't been doing this my whole life, but it's something I've studied my whole life. I'm probably considered a constitutional libertarian. I'm moderate on a lot of views. The thing that really separates me from Anthony Brown the most is probably our Second Amendment views, whereas I'm very pro-Second Amendment. He is very anti-Second Amendment, generally speaking. I still believe in having background checks. I think the National Instant Criminal Background System is something that should be implemented for every gun purchase, public and private, or retail and private sale. Sure. I think it's something that can be tailored to allowing public view so that we know who the violent convicts are, people that have been afforded due process and are identified as violent criminals, that we can say, okay, this person probably shouldn't be buying firearms, probably shouldn't have a gun, right? We could publicly and on the retail side identify those people and know, okay, yeah, we're not going to sell them anything. It's the distributor's responsibility to know who those dangerous people are. So that's probably our biggest separation point. The other one being the fact that the Democratic Party does seem to be going more socialist, which is complete opposite of what the libertarians are. Collectivism requires a level of force that libertarians are not comfortable with and very much against. So that's another big separator. The other one is, and this could be an old quote, and I haven't seen any policy changes or anything up to date from him or any kind of statement, because he's a non-issue candidate. He doesn't discuss the issues with anybody, really.
Anthony Brown.
Anthony Brown, yes, specifically. So the last statement I have seen from him regarding the war on drugs was, well, let's scale back marijuana laws, which to me is outrageous. The fact that we're locking up people for victimless crimes, which aren't crimes to begin with, because what you choose to put in your body is your business. It's not, it's not the government's, especially not the federal government's right to say that.
I agree.
So I think that's another big separator. Is, to me, we need to end the war on drugs. We need to stop the mass incarceration of non-violent people. Prisons for violent criminals. Prison is a punishment. That's not going to rehabilitate anybody. You got more drugs in prison than you have out on the street sometimes.
That's the sad part about it. Is who are you kidding? Who are they kidding when they make that statement to us? Like, it's almost public knowledge. Everybody knows that now.
Exactly.
And they also know that they're just supporting it by paying tax dollars towards it. It makes no sense at all.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're overtaxing people, especially at the federal level. I think we need to see that cut back on the individual level, especially. Individuals were not meant to pay taxes to the federal government. There was a clause in the original Constitution that basically prohibited any kind of federal income tax. The 16th Amendment came in, and it was during a time when the government was struggling a little bit, and they needed the income. So they instituted the 16th Amendment, which allowed the IRS to be created.
I just want to jump in, and please feel free to just carry on with whatever topic or direction you wanted to continue to go in this conversation. But just tell me this, because it baffles me right now. Why is it so difficult to get a libertarian in a top position, top seat in Congress? I mean, every libertarian who sat in that chair where you're at right now and come into the studio are bright individuals, young, all ethnicities. I mean, literally, all ethnicities are libertarians and like-minded. However, there's not a major libertarian in a top seat right now. Can you explain to me why that is, please?
Absolutely. So part of why we have a two-party system is because of the way federal elections take place. One, you don't have term limits. So you keep the same, generally the same Congress members in office 92% of the time. They have a 92% reelection rate. Part of that has to do with the fact that they're receiving campaign contributions the entire time they're in office. Their name is already known because they're a Congress member. So if they do a favor for somebody and that person decides, oh, you know what, I'm going to contribute to their campaign now. Or if they do a favor for a corporation, that corporation is definitely going to contribute, and they can contribute up to $2,800.
I see.
And then the individual that owns that corporation can contribute their own $2,800, right? So they're able to double up the money that they're giving to a candidate. Another part of the problem is campaign finance, and a lot of libertarians might disagree with me on this, but the campaign finance laws allow corporations, due to the case that decided that corporations are people, Citizens United, says that corporations can donate as part of their First Amendment rights, even though they're not an individual. They can donate to campaigns as their freedom of speech. They're practicing freedom of speech.
Representing an individual, so to speak.
That's right. So the owners of the corporation get to donate twice to the candidates. And generally, they're going to...
A loophole.
So exactly. They're going to donate directly to one side or the other because it's a duopoly. The two at the top have made the rules. Part of the issue that we saw in 2016, libertarians aren't invited to the debates at the presidential level because the debates are controlled by the two parties at the top. You can't even get into the debate if your last presidential election didn't have at least 15% on your ticket, 15% of the popular vote. So how do you get the attention for the popular vote if you can't get into the debates in the first place? So that's a major problem too.
Yeah, that's a pretty messed up conundrum there. I mean, what are libertarians expected to do? Or it's almost like they're trying to push you guys back or keep you guys at bay.
Absolutely.
And it's working.
Yeah,
it's working. It's like we were talking about before the show started. The media pushes agendas, and they're not libertarian agendas.
No.
And when you were explaining that to me, this is what I compare that to in my mind. It's almost like a cell phone company that keeps you locked in the plan. They offer you a little discount on a new phone. All you got to do is come.
And that's a good analogy.
And that's the way it seems.
Yep. And the other thing is TV and any kind of media grabs ratings through extremism. You are blown away by something. You're angered by something or some compassionate story here. And so they need to create that divide to drive ratings. Sure. Ratings bring advertisers. Advertisers bring money.
Yep.
So to have that extreme divide, which we're seeing right now in politics, that is driving those ratings way up. And you have to see two sides to divide. If you had to introduce a third moderate side with somebody who's going to speak any kind of common sense or not have an agenda to split the population directly in half, then that's not going to be of interest to anybody. It's not going to drive ratings. And so you see a need for the media to do that, and that's why we have two smaller CNN and NBC channels, and we have a Fox News channel that dominates the right side of the ratings because they want that divide, and they're going to push that divide. I watch BBC. I don't watch any of those three.
Well, let me throw another question at you here. You said you served time as a Marine, correct?
That's right.
And how long were you in the service?
4 years active duty. I did my 4 years inactive. I actually went and did some drill during that 4 years of inactive time. And then I did 3 years in the Army Reserves.
Okay.
Where I ended up resigning and getting my honorable discharge from the Army Reserves as well.
Okay.
So altogether, somewhere around
11
years. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So when you were in the service, and it has nothing really to do with being a libertarian, the question that I'm going to ask, or maybe in some way it does. But you still had the same frame of mind as you do now as a military guy, and what was the feel like? Because it seems like a lot of the enlisted men and women, they can easily. There's a majority of them that feel are liberal minded, and there's still a lot of them that are conservative minded. Like my father was in the service for several years, but he was more liberal thinking. So what was the overall mood during your time in the service to what you could really recollect of the service enlisted people at that time? Did it seem like people were real strong about their country and felt happy to be a part of the society that they're from?
So I went in October of 2000 is when I went to boot camp. I got out of boot camp in January. I went to short combat training, which all non-infantry Marines go to. It was 3 weeks. And then I went to my MOS school, my job skills school for the Marine Corps. That was about 3 months. I got to my duty station July 13th of 2001. We were generally at peace.
Yeah.
2 months later, after
war,
2 months on active duty at my duty station, at a non-deployable unit at that, we're at war. 9/11 happens.
9/11.
I was at the legal office that day. I'm the JAG clerk, so I was at the legal office that day. planes hit, one of the other Marines comes in and says somebody's attacking, and everything changed. Everything for us changed. I mean, there was so much. I mean, Marines always want to fight. So there was so much anger and probably anger turned into motivation.
Sure.
During that week for 50,000 Marines there on base, that we were all ready to get on ships and go fight. You know, I mean, it was probably one of the most patriotic unity times that we felt. I mean, even though such a horrible thing happened, suddenly we realized we're all Americans.
Yep.
You know, and you see the type of people that New Yorkers are when they each need help. You know, when the city needs help, New Yorkers stand up and they help each other. It's horrible as you may get treated walking around the streets some days. They all care and love each other regardless.
Sure.
So it was something that was horrible but led to something great for a short amount of time, and we ended up reacting too fast in the long run because of our anger, because of the way we felt. But you know, I think the general patriotism, the nationalism that came from 9/11 steered us towards a conservative feeling or a conservative base.
Yep.
And I think that wore off over time. And that's how we go to the other extreme left.
And that's why I asked you the question. Because that was a perfect explanation. And if I'd have thought about it a little more before I asked you that time period that you told me you were in the service, that's right when that happened. Exactly. So you got to see the transitions.
Oh, yeah.
The instant transitions, like you said. I mean, one moment everybody's, shooting crap, having a good time, and then all of a sudden everybody's serious, everybody's, heart-wrenching, and everybody means business now. No time for games.
Yeah, you go straight to work.
And then all of a sudden, after some years go by, it wears off.
It did, and then there became this divide, like, okay, the conservatives are now the warmongers, because conservatives were in office when it happened. So you saw this huge outrage towards George W. Bush. You saw this huge outrage towards the fact that we were still in Afghanistan and that we were going into Iraq, which we probably didn't have business going in there either. Towards the conservative side and demonizing the conservative side by the left. And that's really where you see this huge divide start again. I mean, it happened in the past. I guarantee this, the 60s were just as divisive. Yep. And it was different reasons. You got civil rights. You've got other, issues that were more domestic, and you got Vietnam. So you got other, driving forces that are pushing people apart, and they vilified each side. And you saw the same thing with George W. Bush being vilified by the left, and the rise of the socialist movement kind of taking over the left a little bit, and then putting a candidate like Barack Obama in office that seemed like he had the ability to create some unity. I mean, I love the way he talked.
I thought it was going to happen. I was so impressed by his charisma.
Absolutely.
I was and still am a registered conservative at the time, and I still voted for Barack Obama, and I voted for him on both of his terms.
Right.
And I just was not fully satisfied. It was almost like I was waiting, just like everybody else was waiting for that grand thing, something major that he was going to do, or to bring everybody together. It was almost like he could have did it with just it would have taken just a couple sentences, but it seems like it never happened.
Right. And I think we all find it's the great man. I don't know what the right term is, but the great man syndrome, I guess. There's times when great men are born, or women, either way, that they're really more defined by their times than by their ability, potentially. But the world was ready for him to be that great man. And in a lot of aspects, he did some great things. He did some excellent things.
We can probably, if there was somebody else sitting in here, that we would argue that until, as they like.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Blue in the face, But when it comes down to it, when it boils down to it, what you really could do, I'm one individual. I'm a coach. I can do, I can encourage people, and I've done it, and it doesn't take much.
But you're not going to go out there and execute on the field because you're the coach, right?
Right, exactly.
So nothing can be done.
Exactly. So it's like you had your chance. Once you have your chance to do it, and you didn't do it at that time, and you lose, the opportunity, it's gone.
It's gone.
It's gone, especially
That's
when you're in that high of a position in office. In our
absolutely,
type
especially
of
in the democracy or the,
Yep.
the representative democracy that we have, you only get a limited amount of time. It's one of the things I'm actually advocating for, even though we want to see leaders progress, which is kind of where I stand on the term limits issue. If you do well in Congress, in the House of Representatives, you've got a term limit there. If you're doing well enough, you get promoted up to the Senate. You can get your 12 years in the Senate. 6 years in the House of Representatives, 6 years in the Senate, and then if you're doing a great job there, the country thinks you're doing a great job, you can get elected to president. So there's a progression there, and you're still limited in your time and how much you can do regardless. You have to generate a following that's going to keep up that movement. And I think there's still a good amount of momentum to some of the liberal aspects. I think what we need to concentrate on beating back is the socialist ideas that are completely anti-constitutional, at the federal level especially. And I think whereas Barack Obama had his pluses, I think there are plenty of negatives that we could talk about as well. And I think the socialist movement that has kind of captivated the liberal side of the aisle is something we need to kind of beat back and say, yes, we're a United States. We all came together at 9/11. We all, belong to the same country. We're all, whether we're citizens or residents, we're all here together. We all have to share this land, right? None of us are here alone on an island, all by ourselves, and can make the rules up as we go, right? So there is, as much as libertarians hate this term as well, there's still a social contract that exists.
Okay.
But at the federal level, you need to minimize how much of that social contract is controlled by the top.
And explain that a little more in depth, this social contract.
So the basis of the social contract is that we are going to respect each other by the same rules because we have to live in the same society together.
Okay.
Right? I'm not going to steal from you. You're not going to steal from me. That's just general social contract. I'm not going to kill you, if you're not threatening to kill me. That's kind of the idea of a very basic explanation of social contract.
Sure, I understand now.
So it exists. We have a society. We're not alone. We have to have these kind of social rules between us as individuals. We learn to respect each other. But how much of that is controlled at the top is where our problem is. And we have different cultures within the United States. Not just from immigration, which is a huge part of it, but also just from regional differences. You've got different weather in the north than you have in the south.
Yep.
You've got
makes a difference.
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly. You've got different
when you have
population
Louisiana
sizes.
that's always getting hit, with hurricanes and major floods, or in California or Florida or areas like that, then their whole social system is different. It has to be. Things have to be done differently. Funding has to be
It's got to be applied
provided
differently.
differently.
Exactly.
It's got to be applied differently.
Exactly. And that's where, the United States, when you have national or natural disasters, that's where a United States comes together and says, you know what, these people are hurting down here, we need to go help them. And that could be a voluntary effort. I mean, FEMA does a great job of helping with recovery, but there's a lot of voluntary money that flows into situations like that. And I think there's a lot of times that government gets in the way of that. What we're told about now, I didn't visit Puerto Rico, but what we're told about supplies being sent down there and being held up for political reasons that could have been distributed to the masses that were suffering down there, that's bureaucracy getting in the way. The Constitution limits what the federal government is allowed to do. It tells them what they can do, but it also limits what they're allowed to do. The 10th Amendment very specifically says, if it's not in here, it's reserved for the people. The rights are reserved for the people or the states. So if it's not in the Constitution, one item where I think libertarians may also disagree with me, and I'll still defend this point because it is a global and a national scale issue, is the environment. It's not in the Constitution. There's nothing about protecting the environment within our Constitution.
That is absolutely correct. Right. And somehow we talk about it like it is. And we deal with it,
we have the Environmental Protection Agency exists, and it is a federal entity, right?
Like it is.
But because it's a global issue, because it's a national issue, there is a role for the federal government there. And I think that's one of those entities that we need to have a constitutional amendment to authorize and limit. Because if you don't limit it, then they will abuse it just as much as they abuse the Interstate Commerce Clause, because that has been abused nonstop throughout the history of the United States.
I tell you what, every time I get a libertarian like yourself in here, you guys speak so much sense to me. It really baffles me why you're the third party. Now, the good thing about it is all the other parties below you guys, they have a long way to go to get to where you guys are.
They do. We are the third largest in the country.
So, and it seems like you guys are growing. So, if you were, you had a few sentences to talk to the masses, and you wanted to convince people that you're their guy, if they elect you, you can help at least help towards making change, but it's going to take a group and team effort. What would you say to them right now? I mean, if you were standing on the podium right now, and what would you say to the people?
I would say look at where we're spending our money. The idea that we spend money with corporations that are contributing so much to candidates and to different issues, when corporations are not individuals to begin with. Corporations are groups of individuals who only have the interest of their stockholders in mind. They are not interested in the general populace in so much that it makes money for themselves, of course, but other than that, they're interested in the interest of the stockholders. So look at where you spend your money, because they're going to donate to either a Republican or a Democrat. I'm not taking any money from corporations. I'm not taking any money from organizations. Every dollar I take will be from an individual for donations. And that's where we all need to concentrate on. We need to donate individually to the campaigns and the candidates that we believe fit our values best. And we need to get corporations out of our business, out of our government, because that is how government corruption happens.
And just could you state all the different social media sites, your websites,
absolutely,
so people can get in touch with you?
So I'm on Facebook, and that is, you can just look me up, Dave Bishop for Congress. I'm on Twitter, and that is at Bishop 4, the number 4, House. And then my website is Bishop, the number 4, Congress.com. And that's got a good stance, an overview of the stances that I hold on the issues. And I'm looking to expand that soon because I'm running my own website. I'm looking to put some more detail on there that I'm sure people will want to see.
Well, it's been awesome having you here at the TV Free Studio. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you're a busy guy. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully I'll get to have you back here soon. Good luck on your campaign.
Much. I appreciate it, Derek. So, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this, and I'm glad to see what you guys are doing here, and I hope to continue to see you guys grow too. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. So this has been another episode of Maryland Politics here at TV Free Studios in Lansdowne, Maryland. We will see you all next weekend on Maryland Politics. Have a great one.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Hey, Ben Gillette here. Being a libertarian means being skeptical of power. Skeptical there's one way to do things. Is there going to be one way of living that's going to make you, Justin Bieber, Pat Robertson, Marilyn Manson, Hillary Clinton, me, and your Aunt Olga all equally happy? It all comes down to this. Maybe I know the best way to live my life, but wow, I sure don't know the best way to live yours. So why not err on the side of more freedom, respect for what makes us different? If you think a little bit like I do and want to learn more, go to libertarianism.org. We've got podcasts and videos, original source material, and essays all about the idea of using a little more liberty. Libertarianism.org. Be just like me.
Maryland Reporter is a news website about state government and politics. That's what we do. We don't do sports, we don't do entertainment. We do some local news as it impacts politics and state government. From the very start, November 2nd, 2009, we do a daily state roundup from now 50 different websites, the Baltimore Sun, the Washington Post, the Hagerstown Herald Mail, other newspapers around the state, broadcast outlets, smaller newspapers, some blogs, and we put it together, and this is the thing that people find most valuable. But we also do original stories that focus on accountability of state government, transparency, how tax dollars are raised and spent. We do a daily email newsletter that people can go on the site and sign up for. It takes about 10 seconds. That's going out to 8,600 subscribers every weekday. And so, you know, our niche, to repeat again, is really state government and politics.
We hope you're enjoying your visit here this evening. Now, on with the show.
Hello, this is Paul Stefan, and this is another edition of TV Free Baltimore's Film Reviews. And tonight our guest is filmmaker Mark Schell. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me here.
Great. Now tell us a little bit about how you got started in filmmaking.
Well, I got started in filmmaking around 10 years ago. I was actually doing a little bit of independent acting around the area, and so I had a little bit of exposure to what it was like to make short films and things like that. But I actually had a run-in with a coworker in regards to experience and the ability to do things. And my point was, if somebody has strong skills and abilities, they can really set out and do anything they want. And the point I made, I said, well, I don't know anything about making a movie. I've never made one, but I can take the skill, my experience that I have and my skills I have, and apply it to that and actually make a movie. So I set about down this journey and had to learn all the different aspects of making a movie. So I had to learn about writing a script, directing, camera work, editing, the sound editing, music composition, and getting the cast together and getting everything done.
Now, how did you gather that knowledge? Was it the internet, books? Did you consult people, or?
Some of it was actually, observation of being in other movies, so you could observe how people were directing. But a bulk of it was really getting in. The internet's a great resource, so you can find out anything there. So that's where I learned. The internet's where I learned all the editing, how to use the software for editing, script writing. It was all, I'd say most of that was just really from the internet, but how you actually conducted on set, a lot of that was from actual just observations.
Right. I think you may have mentioned in some of the research I've done that you used making films as kind of a learning curve, so that each film you could do more or grow more, or even when we get into things about how you finance, that if you make a profit, you just roll that money over into your next film.
Yeah. So, like I said, I never set out to really be a filmmaker or get into films. But when I did the first film, I started liking it. And I could see that there was a potential there to make it something more and turn it into something profitable. So I set up my strategy, so I'll make a film as kind of a test to learn how to do some of it. Then I went on to do another film that was more of a test. And then the third movie or film was really one that I set out to actually make profit off of.
Okay.
And yes, like I said, I took the money from that to roll into the next one.
There you go. Well, I'm just saying that when you're talking about a micro budget, what's kind of your production budget? Let's say what's the production budget for your current film?
Production budget for my current film is $5,000.
Wow.
Now, I may put more. I've got latitude. It's my own money, so I can put more into it if I so desire to. But that's, and almost all that is for cast.
Oh, okay. Well, bring back again about what are the challenges for a small-time independent filmmaker?
So the biggest challenge that I run into is really with sound. Sound, if you want to do sound at the level of a Hollywood production, you have to have a lot of equipment. You have to have a lot of people on set for sound. With the low budget productions, I have a very minimum number of people on set. I typically won't have more than 2 or 3 actors on a set, and I'll keep no more than 2 or 3 crew on set. So it's really minimal. So if you're running camera, you're also running sound and lighting and kind of everything.
Right, I got you. So what is that concept? Is that was basically your concept of the learning curve? Is that just as you go along, you learn how to do things a little better, a little different,
with everything I do, I'll learn more and I can do it better each time. That can also be kind of painful because you'll look back at something you did and you'll want to keep, well, I can redo it better, I can redo it better. And at some point in time, you have to sort of stop and keep, it's done.
As you said, minimal retakes.
Yeah, and minimal re-editing, because you can get into this loop of, I didn't really like that, I'm going to redo it.
Because I've heard some filmmakers do that. They have problems with a film, and they say, well, it didn't take that long to shoot, but I had several months of editing.
Yeah, so my third movie, I probably spent 2,000 to 3,000 hours editing, because I kept editing and re-editing, and it could become an insanity. So the best thing to do is call it done, grab a beer, and leave it alone.
Now, have all your films turned a profit?
Not all of them. The first 2 were really more for kind of testing and learning.
Yeah.
They did bring in a little bit of revenue, and they're still actually bringing in revenue today, which surprises me. So I get like these $2 and $3 checks every month or 2. It's just kind of interesting. But the third one did pull in a profit, and that's what convinced me to go ahead and stick with this and start working on a 4th, and now working on a 5th.
Now, a lot of people have problems raising money to make their films. How do you raise the money for your films?
From my bank account.
I'm saying, are you totally self-funded?
I'm 100% self-funded, and I even provide some funding. So I helped fund a movie that Eric Myers produced, the Butterfly Kisses.
Right.
And
good movie.
I'm currently reviewing another production that's getting ready to kick off in August up in upstate New York. So
wow. Okay. So you're one of the very rare filmmakers that bankrolls his own film.
Yeah, and my intent is to keep everybody out of it, unless there's cast members or people that I'm close with that want to invest. I would do that, but I don't want somebody to have control over what I'm doing.
Oh, it's more of an issue of control for you, because if you want to have a bigger production, sometimes you need a bigger budget, and bigger budget means you got to look for outsources for funding.
Yes, and I'm not opposed to getting large funding. I want to have control over what's going on, and the other aspect of it too is being able to say I took and continued building upon and achieved whatever I achieved. So.
Right. So it'll be great to see. Now, we know that. Why did you pick the horror genre?
Well, the horror genre sells.
Okay.
So that when you look at the different genres, horror, you can make almost anything into a horror. And lots of things, you can have spiders that are scary. A lot of things can be scary. Right. Clowns are obviously scary, so that's part of why I went down the clown route. Right. But the other aspect of that was, over a period of years, I made different contacts in the industry, and I had a great contact with Chemical Burn Entertainment, and they specialize in horror. So when I'm looking at, if I want to make money, I know I have somebody I can go to and get it distributed and get revenue coming in.
Okay.
So I have comedies that I want to do, but I don't really have an outlet for them yet. So.
Oh, okay. We'll get into that a little bit later. Now, there's also something that was said about your use of family in making the film. So it's not just Mark Shell. There are other Shells in this production.
Yes.
Over the years.
Over the years, yeah. My mother's been in one of my movies. My father's been in a movie. My brother's been in a movie. My kids have been in, I think, every one of mine.
Wow.
At least if they weren't on camera, they were behind the camera or directing or composing music. And my wife ends up being in all my movies, whether she wants to or not. and then my father-in-law, who's in his 80s, he always has some kind of special appearance in all my movies.
It's like Hitchcock. You have to look for him in the movie.
Yeah.
No, it's a Mark Shell production.
Yeah, so he shows up.
But you don't appear in your movies anymore, or do you?
I do. I try not to, but sometimes with the low budget, it just ends up that I got to jump in and do that. So in 8 Ball Clown,
right,
I played like 8 or 9 characters in there, but you won't really notice it. So I stunt.
Wow.
I'll call it stunt double. It's not really stunts, but I'll double for people a lot of times. So if somebody's not available, we'll do stuff where I'll have like a mask on or something, so you really can't see who it is, and then obviously get killed by clown or whatever.
Now, do you do all the distribution and marketing yourself?
No, I actually. That's where.
That's a company.
That's where Chemical Burn comes in.
Okay.
I love them. They're very honest, very easy to work with. They really helped out on 8 Ball Clown with the trailer, helped step that up. But they take care of all that, and that's why I like that particular relationship.
So they do distribution, they do marketing, they do publicity?
Yeah, they do it
all of it?
Yeah. So I can make the movie, get all my pieces done, and turn it over and wait for money.
Has any of your films appeared in theaters?
Not yet. Except for theaters where I put it in myself.
Yeah, I know, but I just meant where it got a deal somehow.
Yeah, not yet. It's one of those where, in the future maybe. So as we continue to work and build upon them, there's that potential. But I'm not relying on that because it's when you look at the number of movies produced and the number that actually get a theatrical distribution.
And these days, though, but also you could say online somewhere, not just something you put up on YouTube, but it could be Netflix, Hulu, something.
Yeah, and the whole industry has really changed over the last, like the last couple years. It's really changing, and Amazon actually has a new platform that they're rolling out. I'm part of that beta test. I had to sign a non-disclosure, but it's what they call it, media on demand. So it's going to change a lot of how independent movies, or if you got like a web series type thing, that you can get that distributed through them and get some revenue coming in.
Well, that's good. Now, of course, your current project is 8 Ball Clown, right? That's your current project.
We're actually on 8 Ball Clown too. So 8 Ball Clown.
All right, but it's not been released yet.
No, it gets released in September.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that one then, because that's sort of like, let's see, the most recent project that's complete.
Yes.
We'll say. Where did the idea for this movie come from?
I have to credit my daughter. She said she wanted to do a movie with clowns, and I kind of took it to a different level, and she got mad about it. So when you see her she's actually in the movie, you'll see her, she looks like she's mad. Guess she is.
Okay. She wasn't really acting then.
She was kind of mad about some of it because I took her idea and twisted it into this horrible, creepy clown thing.
Yeah. Now, how old is she?
She's 14 now.
Oh, okay, she is. Okay. Now, at some time, maybe because you were doing it on when you started this project, but clowns are starting to feel like, they've been done, sort of. I mean, they just had it. In the theaters, and you've had other things like Killer Clowns from Outer Space and all kinds of, because the clown motif has been used, maybe not overused, but it's been used. And why did you choose a clown?
I actually started filming it way before it even.
Oh, okay.
When the distributor decided to move the distribution out about a year. So originally it was planned for last year.
Okay.
But one of the interesting things, when you started hearing a lot about clown sightings and things like that, some of that was actually us. So we were out there.
You were out perpetuating that urban myth?
We were perpetuating that urban myth. So we actually had a really funny incident when we first started doing some test filming. So I'm out in the middle of the woods along Gunpowder Falls River with my son. And it's an area where we go a lot of times, fishing, hiking, things like that. And so it's like, let's go out and do some testing. So we had balloons and clown costumes and stuff like that. And we're out just doing some test filming. And a group of people comes walking through. And I'm like, hi? I'm like, we normally don't see people back here. And they're like, well, we normally don't see clowns back here. I'm like, touche.
So that's how it got it started, huh?
Yeah, and then I know we were filming along Gunpowder Falls River, and there was a couple walking their dog, and they seen the clown with balloons, and asked what was going on. And one of the guys that I work with in my films, John Furman, he says, "Oh, it's my birthday," and my son's there, who was, I think he was 9 at the time, and these people are sort of looking like, okay, the adult has the clown for his birthday, and then there's a kid there. Okay, they were kind of okay with it. They seemed to think it was normal.
a little strange. Now, for people too, if you can tell us, and I don't want to give the movie away, but give an idea of what the premise or the plot of the movie is.
Well, the premise of it is there's a opioid addicted clown. So this has some hidden meanings and stuff underneath it because of the opioid addiction. So it's almost like a public service announcement.
Oh, okay.
Or, so it really focuses around the opioids and what it does to this particular character, and his addiction to opioids turns into addiction to killing.
Wow.
So, and he ends up killing people by overdosing them.
Wow.
Yeah. Not every time. He is a very,
okay.
he doesn't have just one way of killing. So
because after I had read that, I said, "Oh yeah, now I get it." At least I'm old enough to know that all the time you talked about an 8-ball.
Yeah.
That's
and that's where the name comes from.
Yeah.
So throughout the movie, you hear there's all these different drug slang references throughout it, but it's really part of what it shows you is how bad those drugs really are. And the reality of it is people are using stuff and they have no idea what it is, and they're shooting it up. And you'll hear that in the movie that, well, he doesn't care what he shoots up. He shoots up everything, and that's why he's all messed up.
So in a sense, the movie's a horror movie, but it also has a moral.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so you do have a good moral there.
Somewhat.
And there's room for a sequel, apparently.
There's room for a sequel.
8-Ball Clown 2.
2. We had to go with number 2.
There will be a number 2 that you will be working with another director with.
Yeah. Eric Myers, who directed Butterfly Kisses, is now my director on this. And it's going pretty good. We've shot a few scenes. I think we're probably 10-15%.
Is that the first time you've had somebody else direct one of your films?
Yes. Okay. So it's different. It's a challenge because it's one of those things where when you're used to doing it, you want to jump in and you want to say, no, do it this way. And he has his own, he has his own style.
Right.
So we have to learn to work together.
Right. I mean, you're basically then the producer?
Yeah.
Now, did he bring his crew with him, or was it just him?
Just him.
Just him, okay.
Yeah, we're bringing some of the people he's worked with as far as actors.
Oh, other actors.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got George Stover coming on board.
Oh, he's well known.
Yes, he is. Yeah. So he's playing our psychologist.
Wow, I'd love to get him in here.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
He's been around.
Yeah. When we were looking at who to cast for that particular role, when we were looking at different people, my son actually looked at his IMDb profile, and he was one of them who wanted George in the movie because he thought it was so cool how many movies George has been in. So George was and he still is a little bit worried because he has, I'll call it, an incredibly, horribly long monologue.
Oh.
There's no way. I wrote it, but I could never memorize it. And George is like, I don't know about that. I'm like, you don't have to worry about memorizing that thing. We have, there's little tricks to work around that, so it'll look like you memorized it.
Oh, okay. So he won't. It was too long even for him to memorize.
Yeah, it's pages.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like I say, he could extemporize, or like you said, sometimes you tell people the actors can just keep going, make up some lines. But
Yeah, and that's he has the flexibility in that. So there's some key pieces of it that we want delivered, but if he gets on a rambling roll and it's working, that works.
It works for you, huh? And is there a sense too that there's going to be an 8-Ball 3 or no?
Possibly. My daughter surprisingly mentioned maybe doing a number 3.
Wow.
So,
of course, 1 has to get a good reception in September, I guess.
Yeah, I think it will. And then part of what I'll do is I'll look at how well number 1 does, and if it's doing fairly well, then, like I said, I'm interested in making money. So if it's doing fairly well, I'll jump on board and start number 3.
Do you see it as being maybe your biggest grossing film?
Yes.
Yeah. It's got that potential?
Yeah, I believe number 1. Yeah, I've done my calculations on the first one already, and after the distributor revised the trailer and I watched the trailer, I kind of threw my projections out because I think it's going to do much better than what I originally projected.
And you had said something about after seeing that trailer, you re-edited the film.
Yes, and that's why I said earlier, it's one of those things where you can get into, and you can start getting into this re-editing.
Right.
I did set myself a limit, and I set a particular date. I'm like, on this date, done. So I went back and primarily worked on the sound, added a lot more effects to make it creepier, a little scarier. Added a few different minor scenes in there. I actually kind of cheated, and I took a couple pieces from my original movie, Autumn Rage, and put them in there as kind of like clown memories of people he killed, because there were some people that died in that movie, so kind of cheated.
You can put it in there.
Yep.
Hey, that's something filmmakers do.
Yeah. And the number 2 is a little bit different, too. So it actually has zombies. So it's not just clowns. It's
clowns and zombies.
Clowns and zombies.
So there, though, you're getting into like the Night Watchman territory, if you know that movie.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. It's a good movie.
I had those people in here, too.
Awesome.
I had Ken Arnold here and Dan DeLuca.
Yeah, they're great people.
And
I've known them for
the whole thing about,
many years.
The clown pyre and the zombies in that movie, which was a comedy horror film. Have you ever thought of combining the two genres and doing a comedy horror film?
This one actually has comedy in it. Number 2 has some comedy in it.
Okay.
But I'll call it sort of dark comedy.
Okay. Well, that's always good to have, too.
Yeah.
Hitchcock had some dark comedy sometimes.
Yeah, so there's some interesting things. A couple pieces we ended up cutting out while we were filming, but it has some funny things every now and then, because eventually I would like to do a comedy.
Right.
So I'm kind of starting to introduce some of the odd comedy into this.
But you just started filming, too.
Yeah.
That's right. So it's going to go for a while. Your schedule of filming is...
Yeah, we're going light on the schedule, so we're only doing maybe 1 or 2 days a month.
Oh, so...
And they're short days, so like 2 to 4 hours.
So it's going to be a while before that one's ready for you to go to post, huh?
Yeah, probably won't start post until October, November.
Okay, so this is something, if it comes out, it'll be next 2019.
Yeah, we're looking at, it's most likely going to be a September 2019 release.
Oh, so September and then September, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I'm not in a rush.
A year apart,
yeah.
Right.
Originally I started kind of rushing on it, then once I realized that when I had the date of the release of 8-Ball Clown 1 pushed out, it's like, you know what, let's relax and get it done slowly.
There you go. Now, what about any other projects that you have or ideas of things that you want to do?
Well, Eric Myers and myself have written a script together.
Ah.
I wrote the original script, and he went and did a lot of awesome editing to it. Part of why we're working on 8-Ball Clown 2 together is because we want to film that one together, and that's one where I'll invest a lot more money into. So it'll be a much larger budget movie.
What type of film?
It's a horror film.
Another horror film?
Yeah.
Straight horror again?
Straight horror again. Yeah.
Okay. And you don't want to say anything more about that right now. You don't have to either. But we can keep us all waiting on that one.
Oh, yeah, we don't. It's got a particular interesting concept.
Well, keep that quiet for now, because we always tell people, I like having people come here and interview, and you know, you can always come back and you can talk about the other films.
Yeah, that's one where we won't talk about.
Or
the
maybe have
concept
you
yet.
and Eric together in here, maybe on that one. And
Yeah, if we not sure if we're gonna film it. We have to really see how we work
okay.
together.
See how we work together on this one.
Yeah.
So I guess collaboration is also new for him.
Yeah, we've tried that throughout the industry, getting around here, getting people to collaborate, and it's really difficult because everybody has their own agenda. They've got their own styles. They've got, it's always that. Well, if I'm putting this much into it. How much are you putting into it? The time and everything. And
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I mean, what I had heard from other people come in here is they said, something like you said. It's sort of like they said it's kind of cliquish. They said, there's a lot of people in Maryland that make independent films, but they're like little cliques. This little group knows each other and they work together. This little group over here works only with each other, and so that nobody really talks together. Like maybe we could, instead of using an amateur or a family member, say, well, here's a sound man from over here in this group who's not working right now, or here's a DP who's not working right now. He'd work with us on our project.
Yeah. Yeah, so you don't get it. That is true. So it is kind of cliquish. So, I've known Ken Arnold and a lot of them for a long time, but we've never shared resources kind of thing.
Yeah, because I think this next film that he's just wrapped up, is going to be a big one. Bill Tillman and the Outlaws.
Yep.
Where he is the star of that movie, and it's based on real story, a real man, and all that. I think it's got a chance to be in theaters.
I believe so too. It's a pretty good movie, and Wayne Shipley.
Yeah, the director.
Yeah.
I want to get in here too.
He's pretty awesome. So.
He does westerns, I think, is what he's known for.
Yes, he does.
But I mean, all kinds of great people in it. There's Johnny Alonzo, who I want to get in here.
Yeah, I know a lot of the cast.
You do a lot of those people?
Yeah.
A lot of good people.
Crew, I think, cast end up shared a lot. But crew is the piece where there's really, that's it. This person works with this and doesn't work with anybody else.
They exclusively work with that director or that whatever, so that DP or whoever. Now, is there anything else that you would like to talk about in the time we have? Or anything that hasn't been covered, or anything about filmmaking in the Maryland area? I can tell you one thing, again, we bring up with a lot of people here, not everybody, is to say that, in Maryland, it's hard to get films made because of the state of Maryland, the way they distribute money to filmmakers. And the people come in here and they've said, well, if House of Cards gets all the money, or Veep used to get all the money. So they said, we little guys don't get that money.
Yeah, that, on the political side, I go 100% against, we don't want to publish this one though. I actually go 100% against the subsidies, because what the subsidies do, so you're going to take, it makes me kind of mad, because it's like, okay, you're going to take my money and give it to a Hollywood production company who's going to compete against me in that market space.
Right.
No. You need it. So I really don't like the Maryland
Film Commission
at all.
Uh-oh.
So if I went and got elected state government, I would work on getting them gone, or change your thing and support
the
little guys, because I pay people, I pay typically $20 to $30 an hour to my cast. Plus they get bonuses depending on the revenue and everything. So that's bringing real money back into here, where Hollywood, you're paying somebody else, they're bringing in their own crew and stuff. Money's not staying here, it's going elsewhere.
Right.
So don't take my tax money, give it to somebody else who's competing against me. Give it to me, because if you give me $1 million, that's all spent here. It's not going to spend anywhere.
And stays in Maryland.
Stays in Maryland.
Because that's why I say I always congratulate the filmmakers we have here and say, I'm glad you have stayed here and that you haven't gone to Hollywood, you haven't gone to Atlanta, the big spots these days, and keep it here. I mean, because the other complaint we have, as well as the filmmakers have, is the Maryland Film Festival, which just finished, doesn't really try to promote Maryland films and Maryland-made films that much.
Nope. I was surprised that they took one.
And I was glad to see that the Maryland International Film Festival, which did feature Eric's film, And actually, he got the award there as Maryland, the best Maryland film at the festival, which meant there was more than one.
Yeah,
That
I typically don't even claim that I filmed in Maryland. I just say it's all filmed in Ohio.
you say you filmed it in Ohio. Filmed in Ohio.
But they're not helpful at all to anyone who's on the low budget side. So
Right. But I think another great thing I thought when I talked to the woman who runs the festival up in Hagerstown, not only being kind to small filmmakers, people who make short films, there are a lot of short films in that festival, and Maryland films. She said her next idea was to bring in distributors from Hollywood and stuff to come look at the film, so that a lot of these local filmmakers and just even small-time filmmakers, even from not here, can get distribution for their films.
Yeah.
And bring those to these people to the festivals looking for product. And I think that's a great idea.
It is. And yeah, I can probably get my distributor. If he doesn't come, he can send somebody.
Well, maybe we can get that. We'll tell Tracy about that.
Yeah, because if somebody around the area does a horror movie that I think is good, I'll connect them up.
Right. And they do honor Maryland people because they give out an award every year called the Nora Roberts Award. And the woman who got it this year, she's an executive vice president with Spielberg's production company, Amblin Partners.
Oh, cool.
But she grew up in a town of about 1,000 people in Washington County, Maryland.
Yeah.
But she went to Hollywood in '91 and worked her way up to the top. And so they're honoring Maryland people even if they've gone west at that festival.
Yeah.
Which I think makes it a great festival. I don't know much about the Annapolis Festival, but it looked pretty good.
Yeah, the Annapolis Festival was pretty. That's actually the first film festival I ever went to, and only.
Okay, and we may check that out next year because we haven't gone to that one yet. But anyway, we're out of time, and if you can, before we go, look into your monitor and tell people what your contact information is so they can find you and find out news about your productions. Right over there.
The best place to find out information about me is you go to markshell.me. So you can go www.markshell.me, and that's got all my information.
That's all right there. Huh?
Yep.
Okay, not .com, but .me.
.me.
Okay.
It was available.
Okay, terrific.
Somebody already stole markshell.com, so I had to go markshell.me.
Okay, because I thought it was interesting looking up you on the internet. There's a Reverend Mark Shell.
Yes, I think he's the one that took markshell.com. So yeah,
he has a lot of videos.
Yeah, so if you're looking for me and you find Reverend, that's not me. Although actually I am a Reverend.
Are you really?
Yeah, I'm not that one though.
You're not that guy.
I'm not that guy.
But you're one of those guys who maybe ain't got the degree over the internet or something.
Yeah, because we do weddings or the wedding ceremonies.
I mean, there'll be real weddings then, because you're ordained. So
yes. So my wife and myself do that as kind of a hobby.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
So I am a Reverend, but not that Reverend.
All right. Well, thanks for stopping by, Mark.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right. And well, that's another end of another episode here of We Looking at the Movies here at TV Free Baltimore. So until next time, this is Paul Stefan, and wait and see who walks in this door next time. Bye-bye.
We hope you're enjoying your visit here this evening. Now, on with the show.
Good morning. I see you've already met my colleague, Mike Lee. He's a good guy, and we do a lot of things together and work on a lot of projects together. You might be scratching your head and asking yourself, what is a libertarian doing talking to a bunch of evangelical students? Aren't libertarians crazy? Aren't they kind of scary? And I think it's a misconception sometimes because when you hear the word libertarian, you think, well, gosh, libertarians, they want anything goes, right? No rules, no laws, you can do whatever you want. And it's not exactly what we advocate. Libertarians do advocate freedom, liberty. We advocate government ought to leave you alone and that you ought to get to make choices on your own. But would that mean lawlessness? Would that mean no rules, anything goes? Well, even libertarians believe in some sort of rules. And so one of the rules that libertarians believe in is something called the non-aggression principle. And this is a principle really that when you hear it, you'll say, well, gosh, most government is founded upon this. The non-aggression principle means that under a libertarian society, if we had one, you pretty much could do whatever you wanted as long as you didn't hurt somebody else. So as long as you didn't invade their sphere of their rights, you could kind of do what you wanted. And you say, well, gosh, then there still would be all kinds of crazy things. Everybody would be doing heroin, there'd be prostitution, there'd be all these things. And really, many of us who are Christian and libertarian believe that not only would you be restrained by government from doing things that would harm somebody else, but that a libertarian society, or even a republic, as we were intended to be, would have some kind of restraint. And some people have described it as virtue. Washington described the beginning of the republic, and he said it would be necessary for our country to succeed to have virtue. So you'd have the idea that the government would restrain you from harming other individuals, but there has to be something that also guides us, that keeps us on the straight and narrow, allows us to cooperate as a civilized society, allows us to be an advanced society. Think of it this way. There are laws against stealing, and there should be, but how many in here would steal if there were not a law against stealing? Oh, good. I'm glad we don't have any thieves here today. But the thing is most of us don't steal. Most of us don't rape, murder, do all these horrific things, not because there's a law against it, but because we have a sense of right and wrong. We have a moral compass. We have something grounded in religion. We have this sense of virtue. And you think, well, how many people have this? And that's sort of the question of where a society goes over a long period of time. Some would argue that we had more virtue 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. That may or may not be true, but there's at least some argument to that. Some who look at Europe say that they've abandoned religion and they've become much more secular, and they've sort of lost their sense of right and wrongs in some ways. So really you have to have both. You have to have a government that restrains you from harming someone, but you also want to have a people that is a virtuous people. There's a theologian by the name of Os Guinness, and he puts it this way. He says that liberty requires restraint, but the only restraint consistent with liberty is self-restraint. And so the reason why that's important is we often see, particularly from Christians, they come to Washington and they say, we've got all these terrible, immoral things happening, government has to fix them. When in reality, it may be that there are some things that do need fixing that perhaps we can't fix. And I'll give you an example. The number one correlation, causation, whatever you want to have it, with poverty in our country. If we say we want to wipe out poverty, what's the number one thing that is linked to poverty in our country? It's having children before you're married. Now, I'm not here to moralize or tell you, what's right or wrong. I'm just here to tell you that is the number one link. If you look at charts, there's a book by Charles Murray called Coming Apart at the Seams, and he does 2 categories of charts on everything, all the socioeconomic, all the income, everything about your life, and there are 2 tracks. One, people who don't finish high school and have children before they're married, and they're here along the bottom of the x-axis. And then you see at the very top of our society, the top elite, and these aren't all true, but they're mostly true, it's generalizations, people who finish college and wait to have kids. But then you say, well, what's government going to do about this? I can't make you wait. So really, sometimes when I agree with a group of ministers, they say, what are you going to do to make us a better, more moral nation? I say, well, what are you going to do? And really, there has to be some of that. And I think there has to be this realization the government can't do everything for you. You have to be part of it. And it doesn't mean it's not important. It doesn't mean that virtue is not important. It doesn't mean that we don't want virtuous people in government. But it means that government's not going to make us a virtuous society. And I think that's very important when we think about what we want from government and where we're going. A second way of looking at this would be on the idea of rights. So the right to be left alone, the right to practice your religion, the right to have property, the right to have speech, all of these rights that are sort of in the Bill of Rights. Did the government grant you these rights, or did they pre-exist government and the government guarantees these rights? And it's very important when we look at rights because many of us who see the Founding Fathers and talk about the idea of natural rights or God-given rights, we think they're innately yours. The right to speak, to practice your religion, to keep the fruits of your earning, these are yours. They're just inherently yours. Now you say, well, we have to give up something to be in a society, right? Well, there are certain things, like for example, your property. As you go out and you earn your check and you get your check and you've worked 2 weeks, a portion of it's taken by the government. You say, well, aren't they taking my stuff? Well, they are, and we have this idea, maybe not explicit, but we have this idea of a social compact. So you say, we're going to live in a civilized world and part of my check's going to be taken. And so we kind of implicitly agree to this, but if at the end of 2 weeks you were to make $600 and you got your check and it said minus $600 and your net was 0, how many people would like living in that society? then 100% of the fruits of your labor would belong to government, would be taken from you. So the question always is, when we look at issues like this, whose money is it? Well, I think it's yours. Are you willing to give up some of it? Yes, but I want to minimize how much I give up it because I want to maximize my freedom and my ability to either give it to my church, help the people in my community, or help my family. And so really it's always a question of maximum or minimum. How much government do you want? You want the least amount of government that we need, because the more government you have, or the more of your paycheck you give up, the less of your freedom you have. And so this is the tug of war, but I think it's an interesting way of looking at it when you try to decide, do you want more government or less government? Do you want government to do X or Y? Is government good at doing things? You ask yourself, if you have $100, if each of you had $100 and you were going to give it to somebody, if you thought, I really want to help people, would you give it to the federal welfare system, or would you give it to the Salvation Army? I wouldn't hesitate for a second. There's no way I would send $1 up here that I didn't have to, because they're just not very good at it. They're so far away from the people that can't do it, but I can see in my community what the Salvation Army does. I can go to the homeless shelter. I can go to Helping Hands in Christ and see how they help people pay their bills. Now you say, well, government does do some good for people. They probably do, but they're horribly inefficient at it. And so you say, well, we need government to take care of people. It's like, these are the people that can't run the post office. All right? They have a monopoly on delivering letters and they lose $1 billion a quarter. They're just not very good at it. So government is best that governs least, so you have the most amount of freedom, but government is also best that governs at a more local level. Doesn't make it perfect, but you can at least see it. Your city councilman or city councilwoman lives down the street. You can talk to her about, or him about, an idea about how you might have better sidewalks or how we might do something for the homeless in our community. But if you send it up here, we will throw lots of money at it and it won't be any better. Department of Education. We didn't have it when I was a kid. We have it now, and our scores are maybe not any better than they were before we had the Department of Education. You say, well, should government be involved in education? Well, there wasn't any provision for it in the Constitution. You say, well, no government? What would happen? What would happen if the Department of Education disappeared tomorrow? What would happen to us? Probably nothing. The thing is most of your taxes that support your schools are from local taxes. In Kentucky, 95% of our taxes are from Kentucky taxes. And we have a Department of Education there, but we duplicate everything. So the Department of Education has had all these teaching standards and testing standards, and then Kentucky does the same thing, and they're spending millions of dollars doing the same thing the Department of Education is doing. We take all these tests, and the teachers are forced to teach to the test, and then in the end, we're not really positive whether anybody's any smarter other than they can take these tests. And there still are those who argue that we're not doing better. One of the things I think we could do in education is allow more freedom.
Guns, the loud killer. Or, why you should support gun control and why the only people who don't want restrictions on the Second Amendment are child-killing right-wing bigots.
Look, I believe just as much as the next guy in protecting our children, but gun restrictions have proven to be ineffective. In the words of Ben Franklin, those who would trade safety for liberty deserve neither and will lose both.
Ben Franklin was a brainwashed NRA bigot. Plus, if the Founding Fathers were so smart, how come they're dead? Gun violence, that's why. Did you hear about the most recent mass shooting? Let me stand on graves and manipulate your emotions for a moment. The shooting was done with an AR-15, also known as the ghost gun. Called that because it turns people into ghosts. The AR-15 ghost gun has a 2 trillion round clip, fires 500,000 bullets per microsecond, and if you think that's bad, you haven't even heard about the bullet button. One press of that sucker and you unlock the cheat code for unlimited ammo and invincibility. Even worse, free AR-15s are being distributed with every pre-order of Call of Duty, and AR-15 ghost guns are being delivered to mental health facilities by the NRA as part of their Kill Children program.
The preceding information may be entirely untrue.
We need to do something about automatic weaponry.
Actually, fully automatic weapons are illegal and have been illegal for many years, and most crime isn't committed with AR-15s, it's handguns.
Plus, violent crime has been decreasing for years. And almost all of gun violence is the product of gang violence in leftist-run cities. The likelihood of actually being killed in a mass shooting is extremely low. Extremely low? Have you not heard there were 355 mass shootings in the U.S. this year? 355? That's ludicrous. Who would believe that? Well, NPR, PBS, HuffPo, Vox, Washington Post, New York Times, MSNBC, and CBS believe it. Where did they get this information? From Reddit, so you know it's trustworthy.
The info came from a subreddit which was turned into a website called MassShootingTracker.org.
Take a look at these terrible shootings. Oh, and almost half of them, not a single person died. It's almost like they weren't actually mass shootings. Wow, it looks like America has the safest mass shootings in the world. In fact, our mass shootings are so safe that we're willing to call 3 or more people being shot with a BB gun a mass shooting. In the US, there have been 14 trillion mass shootings in the last half hour. But it doesn't have to be that way. Look at Australia. Australia is a land where everything is trying to kill you. Except guns, of course, because they got rid of them. Huzzah for Australia, a country which saw a plummet in violence after its gun ban. Ignore the fact that this is a continuing trend in which gun violence in Australia was decreasing at an identical rate before guns were banned. And seriously, who needs an AR-15 for hunting? Or self-defense? A simple handgun works. You don't need a ghost gun.
Well, actually, the AR-15 is one of the most popular hunting rifles, and they're great for home defense, too. Not only that, but inner-city shop owners especially need AR-15s to protect their stores and families in case of riots when journalists irresponsibly rile up racial tensions.
Ugh, it's justified outrage. Get over it.
Look, not only are you losing the arguments on home defense and hunting, but even if you weren't, the Second Amendment isn't about those things. It's about the ability to rebel against tyranny.
That's paranoid and insane. The government will never become tyrannical.
What do you think of Donald Trump?
He's literally Hitler. He wants to put Muslims and women in FEMA camps. The Constitution was talking about the militia, by the way, not the people. And militia translates to government military.
What? No, it doesn't. The people are the militia. And why would any government need to give itself the right to own guns in a founding document?
I'm done with this conversation, you right-wing, pro-NRA, anti-child, anti-woman, death-loving bigot. You may have been taken in by these pro-violence hate facts, but I have enough faith in the public to trust that they will believe the objective and logical truths I propose. Guns are icky. The government was giving itself the right to own guns with the Second Amendment. AR-15s are useless for home defense and hunting, but are also the most dangerous and effective killing machines ever created. Governments never become tyrannical. Trump is Hitler, and if he wins, our government will become tyrannical. And if by some stretch you're able to poke holes in any of these airtight arguments, get ready for me to fall back on this. The Constitution is a living document, which means it says whatever I want it to say. The NRA disagrees. They think the Constitution is dead. Why? Because they shot it, that's why. But it survived. The question is, will our children survive?
Hey guys, it's Freedom Tunes. Thanks so much for watching. If you like watching leftist nonsense get destroyed and made fun of in animated form, subscribe on YouTube and like us on Facebook. If you really like watching leftist nonsense get destroyed, donate on Patreon to help me make more cartoons. Thank you so much.
You're watching The Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, welcome again to another edition of The Paul Stefan Show. Tonight, our guest is another of Maryland's filmmakers. We have with us Edgar David Nazario. Welcome, Edgar.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's good to have you here. Now, tell us a little bit about you. People don't know you, so give me your background.
I am a director, cinematographer. I also do a little bit of writing and editing. My start was in music videos, mainly because my own band needed them. So I just took it on my own hands and fell in love with the medium, and here I am.
Very good. But we go back further. You're actually a native of Puerto Rico, aren't you?
Correct.
And when did you come to America?
2009.
Really?
Yeah.
So spent a good part of your life on the island.
Yeah, most of my life, pretty much.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what did bring you here?
My wife.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we met while she was on vacation, and
wow,
one thing led to another. Long distance relationship became official relationship, and I ended up moving.
Terrific love story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, where did your interest in or love of film come from?
Oh, that's always been there.
Oh, it's always been there.
I started with visuals as a kid, drawing, before I moved to music. And then from then I started photography, and then grabbed the video camera and fell in love with seeing pictures in motion and everything. But for the most part, I grew up, we had a second run cinema blocks away from my house. So I used to go watch movies with my parents, and a lot of sci-fi, a lot of 80s movies.
Okay.
That's pretty much what got the spark in me
Was it American films? Or
Oh yeah,
mostly?
yeah. I didn't get into foreign films until later in life. Like we grew up watching American films. That's pretty much all we had.
Oh, okay, because I thought with Puerto Rico, even though it's part of America, I would think because of Spanish-speaking country, you might get some films from Mexico or Spain. Or,
We did. They were mostly films from Mexico, or at least the ones that we had access to when I was growing up, were the old black and white hacienda kind of films where they had, their version of cowboys and.
Sure.
I
gotcha.
But modern filmmaking wasn't very prolific in Latin America during the time I was growing up.
Gotcha.
Now it's a different story.
Of course. But now, what came first for you, the music or the film?
That's a very interesting question. Music officially came to me first. But the seeds of storytelling were there before I even discovered music. I was writing short stories. I was drawing comics. I was doing all these things, trying to put together stories way before I even discovered my first instrument, which was the piano.
Oh, okay. But you also play guitar.
Yes, correct.
And are those the only two instruments you play?
No, guitar, bass, piano, just a tad bit of drums, vocals.
Wow. Okay, terrific. And did you perform in Puerto Rico or part of a band there? Or?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was in several cover bands and also had a band called Doses. And right before moving here, we got signed to a very small boutique label.
Wow.
The label didn't last, and neither did the band.
Oh, boy.
So I then started playing music here and eventually started my own band, The Purge Effect, a few years ago, I would say probably 2010.
Okay.
And that lasted until 2016, pretty much.
6-year run's pretty good for a band.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun. It's something that it's a nice way to take your creative process and split it into different what's the word? It's a good way to take all your creative work and split into different disciplines. I find that I'm able to tell stories both in the written page and as music in different ways, but it's still part of telling a story.
Right, but you write songs too, or no?
I do, yeah.
So that's another way for you to tell the story through the lyrics.
Yeah. Yeah, The Purge Effect's first album was basically a bedroom production. I programmed all the drums, played bass, guitars, and recorded vocals, mixed and mastered the whole thing, and put it out before our first show. So that was quite an undertaking.
We talked about that. I guess I'd call it the blend of the different disciplines. How do you see music influencing your work in film, and how do you see film influencing your work with music?
So, as far as music influencing film, I think that those two are completely not just related, but dependent on one another. Because when you make a film, you're taking all these pieces and putting them together like a puzzle, but it needs a rhythm, and rhythm is the basis of any successful film or any successful story. Period. Everything has to have a beginning and an end, and a beginning, climax, and an end, and in between you get all these beats. And when you look at it, it's almost broken down into music beats. So having a music background and the understanding that storytelling is linked to that function is a pretty good way to look at storytelling altogether.
Interesting.
As far as film influencing music, in that same way, you have to construct a story to tell through music. The greatest songs we've ever experienced all tell a story, and they all have that same kind of feeling of beginning, middle, and end, and having a climax and a resolve at the end. So, yeah, in that sense, I believe that's how the two are parallel.
Okay, something I will get back to, but I can jump in here because you brought it up, is with the music, and you talk about music and film and that whole idea of a rhythm. Do you find that as a cinematographer, you develop a rhythm in your shots, or as far as shot sequence, I'm going to go slower tempo here, faster here, move this around? I mean, do you find yourself a rhythm through a sequence, a scene, or through a film when you're shooting?
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens twofold. It happens during the pre-production stage when you're planning everything, because your job is to sit down and think of how everything is going to play on screen. And this is completely independent from the editor. And I'm pretty sure you've heard this before, but the movie's made 3 times in the writing, in production, and in post. But during production and in pre-production, you plan the rhythm of the scenes beforehand. And having that it's, I don't want to call it vision, but having that certainty of this is the best way to play out a scene in terms of rhythm. It also works with the director. In my case, a lot of the work that I've done, I've had to self-direct. Because I've worked for music videos for bands that have limited budgets. So I'm director, producer, cinematographer. I'll come in and set up all the lights and then do everything. So in my mind, I already know what the rhythm of the video is going to be like, because I've already studied the song and studied the concept that we're trying to pull off. When I'm working with a director, then it's a matter of figuring out the rhythm with the director and trying to bounce ideas off of each other until you come up with something that works.
Right. And if I want to add another layer to this, I don't know if all movies are able to have a score.
Absolutely.
But then if the film has a score, then somehow, I don't know if I've not had a composer in here yet, but I do have a composer online to bring in here, and I think it's like you make the film first, and then the composer has to find a rhythm in the music after it's been shot. Maybe not completely final cut, but still. But again, it's whether you're maybe setting the rhythms for if somebody's doing original music. It's a little harder, I guess, or maybe harder or easier. You can tell me if you're using found music or music in the public domain. But
it is an undertaking. What's being done now is that a lot of editors will take what they call temp music and find music on the on public domain or music that you purchase, and you put it under and you edit and you kind of work your rhythm with that temp music before. By the time you hand it to the composer, that beat is already set in motion and it's in place. My favorite kind of scores are the ones that are built organically. Looper is a great example of a good sci-fi score where it's not musical per se. It's just a lot of extraneous sounds that are adding to the whole soundscape of the movie. So in that case, you can play around with rhythm and just be a little bit more flexible with that.
Well, good. So I'm just thinking, let's see what I'm looking at here. When did you decide to become a cinematographer?
I don't think I ever made that choice. The camera, my
camera
work,
choose you?
Yeah, pretty much. I think my camera made that choice for me.
Okay.
I bought my first DSLR back in 2010, just as part of experimenting with photography. I was taking classes at Harvard Community College, and I was doing video production back then, and I started seeing. I actually had a small camcorder that I used, and pretty much carried around everywhere. I fell in love with pictures in motion, and that was pretty much anything that had motion in it. It just caught my eye. So once I picked up that DSLR, everything shifted for me. I figured, wow, this starts to look a lot more like the images that I grew up watching on the big screen. And from then on, it was just a matter of experimenting and learning about lenses and what optics do, and why a long lens will compress and a wide lens will expand something. All of that, I started becoming obsessed with how light works as it goes through the lens, and how the artifacts that it causes, and how it affects depth of field. All of these things just eventually I started obsessing over them until they became second nature. So it got to the point where just making images, moving images, became second nature to me.
But didn't you start, I may have got you wrong, but didn't you start with a still camera?
I did. But most of the photos that I enjoyed taking, and I know that this is kind of frowned upon with photographers, when you get blurry pictures of things that were moving, those were the ones that caught my eye. So instead of capturing a perfect still of something in motion, I would go to concerts. I would go to rock concerts with this camera that was definitely not ready for low light conditions. So that meant slower shutter speeds, and you would get a picture of a drummer, and the arms just basically disappear in the air because they're playing so fast. And those are my favorites, because I see things are in motion, and when you look at the picture, you feel like you're a part of something that's in motion. So it just became something to pursue.
Did you bring that, or do you bring that feel into your cinematography, the feeling of motion?
Absolutely, yeah. I believe in the power of a good steady shot when it's a conversation. I'm also a big fan of theater. So in order for us to let the actor shine in a moment and be in the moment, there are moments where the camera needs to be completely still and let the audience just take in all that emotion. But for the most part, yeah, I need to have some sort of motion going on through the scene so that it engages the audience and pulls them in.
Okay. And so that means you would be suited to filming action films or horror films or things like that. Place where it's action a lot. As opposed to I don't know, a melodrama or something, but where it's just a lot of talking heads. You wouldn't be as comfortable with that, I guess.
I feel that I can do both, but I grew up on action and sci-fi. That's pretty much all I did. I would spend my neighbor across the street. He's long gone, but he used to copy movies onto videotape, and he would have a library of movies that he would just rent and just copy them onto 3 movies into one videotape.
Wow.
So during summer, I would stay home all day and I would just go across and get some movies from the neighbor. He became my blockbuster. So I would spend the whole day just watching 4 or 5 movies every day.
Wow.
Just taking all that in.
Yeah.
And
your education.
Pretty much, yeah.
Did you, though, have any formal education in filmmaking, cinematography, any film courses?
Formal, no. I did go to school for mass media. Okay. My actual background is in sound engineering. And then I went into mass media. I didn't finish because my work schedule always conflicted with everything. So I started buying books and just studying anything from screenwriting to shot composition and optics, books on cinematography, books on directing, books on storytelling altogether, just trying to get a clear understanding of what I needed. And pretty much that's been my philosophy all along. If there's a need for a visual effects shot and I don't know how to do it, I'll learn it or figure it out on the spot. Trial by fire, pretty much.
So you're primarily self-taught.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same with music.
Same with music. Okay. Now, how did you basically break in then into filmmaking? A lot of people say, well, how do I get a start? How did, that person get a start? Or how do I get paid to do this thing I like to do? So how did it start for you? What was your...
Music videos.
Oh, the music videos again. You mentioned it earlier.
And I believe that everybody that's serious about filmmaking should probably start with music videos because it teaches you very important lessons about filmmaking.
Okay.
The most important one being economy. You have to tell a story in 3 to 4 minutes.
Right.
And you can't be precious about your shots. You have no idea how many times I've sat down in the edit room just trying to jam that one shot that I thought was beautiful into the edit, only to yank it out because it didn't serve the story. And you can't be precious about it. So it's all about economy. It's all about planning. It's all about figuring out what you want to do before you even get to doing it. So you're not winging it on the spot. There are exceptions, of course. With music videos, there are many moments that are lightning in a bottle kind of situations, but those are mostly for performance shots. Well, you'll have a camera roaming around the band and they're performing and something happens and you're there to document that. And that's something that's completely unplanned and it's beautiful. But for the most part, I think that making music videos taught me a lot of the hard lessons that I needed to learn to successfully tell a story as a filmmaker.
Well, it's good. I think it's a shame. I know back in the 80s when it came on the scene, MTV, I think I don't know if I say a lot, but some of the directors who did those music videos went on to do feature films.
Yeah, absolutely. David Fincher.
Fincher, big name.
Yeah, he's my favorite director of all time, and I've studied his career, and to find out that he got his start with music videos was I blanked out.
It's okay.
An inspiration. To find out that he started making music videos was just, once again,
He's feeding you a word. Inspiration, inspiring. It may not be what you want.
It was reassuring. It was reassuring to see someone that is at the top of my list of people that I would like to work for or work with. To know that their background parallels yours is always reassuring.
Now, when you talk about the economy, other directors got their starts doing commercials.
Yeah,
like TV
absolutely.
commercials. Again, you're telling a story in 60 seconds or less.
Yeah.
And that's one way to go about it. So we'll start for you with the music video. Now, as far as being in film, as you say, you're a filmmaker because you've worn many hats, right? Cinematographer, director, writer, editor.
Yeah.
You identify most with being a cinematographer?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That's cinematography, color grading, and visual effects. Anything that's involved in post-production and the shooting of scenes is where I feel at home.
Okay.
All the other roles that I've done have been by obligation, basically. I've been forced to put myself on that spot. But cinematography is my passion.
What do you see as the role of the cinematographer?
To successfully, it's twofold. One is to bring the director's vision to life, which is very important. There are directors that are very visual in the way that they build things. They'll come in with something already pre-planned in terms of color palette, in terms of images, in terms of how they want their shots. They're very knowledgeable in terms of cinematography, and your job is basically to paint their image. Just make sure that it's lit properly and that it conveys the message that the director needs. There are other directors that are focusing on performance, and they allow you, and that's my favorite kind of role, because I have a blank canvas to make all sorts of decisions that will amplify what the director's intent is.
Okay.
The other role of the cinematographer is to draw the attention of the audience.
Ah.
And that is the most important part, and I feel that's where beginner cinematographers usually not fail, but look over that aspect of the situation. It's not just composing a beautiful image. It's also making sure that whatever you want to be the focus of the scene becomes the focus of the scene. And that comes with lighting, and that comes through the colors that you're using. Production design, you have to work with production designers to make sure that the color palette represents the emotions that you're trying to convey in a scene. And I think, to me, that is the key right there to doing the job well, is having all those things in the back of your mind and understanding what you're trying to convey, what the scene means, communicating with the director and seeing what they want from everything, and then bringing it to life.
Because the cinematographer, as you said, basically is showing the audience what they need to see. Sort of the audience has to come along because you are, in a sense, their eye. That you are showing them. And one of the things I read, it said too, role of the cinematographer is to tell a story.
Yeah. You're collaborating with the director to tell the story that the director wants to tell. And to do that job correctly, you have to be in that same frame of mind and be able to have a shorthand with the director and say, all right, we're on the same page here. We know what we're going for. Let's discuss the scenes, figure it out. And then from then on, the director can focus on his actors, which are the actual life of the movie. While the cinematographer is just basically navigating the waters, making sure that everything that needs to be the focus is the focus.
Well, I know that it seems important, the relationship, especially starting, I guess, in pre-production, between the cinematographer and the director, and also the cinematographer and the production designer, as you sort of touched on with the color palette. So how important are those relationships, and how do you interplay, in a sense, with the production director? You already told a little bit about the director. How does the cinematographer interplay with the production designer beyond the color scheme?
Well, as part of the pre-production process, one of the most essential things is to define a look first. This is how you know whether you're going to end up with a bright superhero movie like Avengers or a dark one like Batman and Superman. You have to figure out what the look is first. And from there on, once you figure out what the post-production, what it's supposed to look like in the end product, that's where you go, all right, this is our color palette. We can remain in this color palette throughout the entire movie if this is something that we're going to bring in, like Sin City with the yellows and the reds among all the black and white images.
Stuff, right.
Once you have that defined, but also every scene has to be properly taken care of. Like, for example, you'll see the wardrobe on the actors, and if there's any color that pops out and stands out that doesn't belong in the scene, that all needs to be balanced. And that part of my responsibility as a cinematographer is to catch these things, because I know how things are going to look through the lens. And that's the most important thing. It doesn't matter if anything looks cheap on set, as long as it looks great through the lens. That's the most essential thing. So being able to figure out whether 2 shades of pink are going to work out in a certain scene. Guy's tie is pink and her dress is pink, and you want them both to match. Figuring out what works and what doesn't. That's pretty much the extent of the role with the production designer. And also knowing going in and doing your location scouting and checking out your locations and figuring out what angles you want to cover also helps inform the production designer as to how they're going to decorate their the set, dress the set and wardrobe. All those decisions come through the lens of how you're going to frame the scene first. So it begins, to me, at least in my opinion, it begins with the cinematographer and with the feedback of the director and the cinematographer just figuring out which scenes, what the coverage is going to be, and then using that to inform the production designer as to how they should complete the work on screen.
We've had a couple screenwriters in here too. So where do the screenwriters come into, or do they play a part at this point? Because it's saying they wrote it on the page, they had an idea of this is their story, they had a vision. Sometimes that screenplays, as opposed to a play that you act on stage, it'll say, you know, so-and-so wore this colored whatever, and it was in this kind of a place, it was out in the forest, or it was here and there. And I'm just saying, does that just get considered because the screenwriter's probably been paid and they're back home again? Or because I don't think screenwriters are always on set. But
It does. I think it ultimately falls in the hands of the director.
Okay.
Obviously, you have these conversations in pre-production.
Right.
But when the screenwriter puts together their job is to tell a story.
Right.
It's less descriptive. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned in screenwriting and feedback from other people is I don't need to know how beautiful it is. I don't need to know, like, spare me the details. Tell me a story in the most simple way you can and leave that stuff to the director. Because it could change. I mean, the director could read a script and think, hey, that golden pot of gold, or that pot of gold needs to be silver.
There you go.
That's how it works. So those details eventually, they get discussed. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
And the other thing too, I thought was interesting that I read about it was saying that I didn't realize this, that I guess the DP or the cinematographer is also in charge of the lighting crew.
Yes, yes.
And I always thought maybe there was a lighting director on a set or something, but like they have in theater, but maybe not.
Well, so the cinematographer has to sign off on pretty much every image. That's the lighting crew. They have the gaffer, who is the person that's basically in charge of making sure that the lighting is done to the specifications of the cinematographer's needs.
Gotcha.
So as a cinematographer, you'll figure out what needs to happen lighting-wise and ambient-wise to make the scene happen, and then you go to the gaffer and say, "This is what I'll need," you know.
Okay.
And then the gaffer will take his crew or her crew and handle that.
And they'll figure it out.
Right.
Because like when you talk about things like the palette and this color pink and that color pink, and it's also the way something's lit, will give a different tone to that particular color or object of that color. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see. I didn't realize that at all. So I'm trying to think here. So you are, like I said, also in charge of all that, and you have these great relationships. What about though? Do you feel that you have enough independence in your job? I mean, or is it not something where you figure, this is the way I want to do it, and I get to do what I want to do, or I'm frustrated because of the director wanted this, or the production designer wanted that? Or
I don't think I've encountered a single situation where I wasn't happy with the role that I was playing.
Okay.
I'm extremely collaborative.
Okay, good.
A lot of my projects have been, again, music videos in which I've had to collaborate with the bands and trying to figure out what they want to tell, what kind of story they want to tell, and that informs me. So in a way, having that collaborative process as a background has helped me work with other people as well. There are other projects in which I've played several hats, including director.
Right.
So in that sense, then I don't have to worry about consulting decisions with anyone.
Okay. Now, what about any current or future projects you're involved in?
I am in development for a project called The Emergence. It's a sci-fi anthology TV series.
Oh, wow.
We started our crowdfunding back in October, November. Originally, we had budget for $10,000, but we didn't get that far. We made a little bit over $1,500. So the challenge now is taking this pilot that we've written, a 30-minute pilot that we had budgeted for $10,000, and figuring out how we're going to do it for a fraction of that.
There you go.
Which is exciting, and it's also scary because we have that limits pretty much everything. The most important thing is to keep your crew fed.
Okay.
So a lot of that money is going to go to that, and everything else is on a base of favors. It also means that you don't outsource a lot of things to other people.
Right.
Everything needs to be done in-house. So because that's the pilot, I wanted to get the experience of directing that first pilot. My plan for it, once it's done, what I would love to do is collaborate with local filmmakers, each one directing a different episode.
That'd be cool.
While I stay as cinematographer, just to ensure a visual consistency in terms of the look. But yes, we're very excited about it. It's a team of 6 writers. We got together, put together this story. I pitched it to them. I said, what if all of a sudden we have an alien invasion and ships appear everywhere and then nothing happens? They just hover. What would that do to the psyche of the people in the ground? And I love the idea of playing into. I was very inspired by the post 9/11 mania, all this emphasis on safety and being attacked and all that plays a lot, because that was a very important moment in American history, and that impacted pretty much everyone all around the globe.
Yes.
So it basically gave us this notion of what if we're not safe? And that plays into what The Emergence is doing. The focus is not the ships in the sky, is on the effect of people living their day-to-day. So that's pretty much what we're doing. We've crafted 8 stories based on that.
Terrific.
And hopefully if the pilot does well and we can get it sold, we'll get to tell the rest of the stories.
Great. Now, before we stop, though, I noticed something else. I don't know how long ago it was. It said you were also interested in something called The Girl from the Stars.
Yes. That's a story that I've been writing for about 2 years. The biggest lesson that I learned from screenwriting, and the first thing that somebody told me, was write what you know. And that's been said many times, but it didn't hit me until that person told me, just write what you know. So having had struggles with depression in the past, that's where the story comes from. It's about a man that's reeling from a tragic accident in which he accidentally killed a woman and her 2 kids.
Oh, wow.
And he's isolated himself from the world, and he finds this girl basically just sheltering herself in his shed in the backyard. And she claims to be from another planet.
Oh, okay.
Now, is she crazy? Is she really from another planet? Those things are that's where the story starts to build,
Sounds
and the
interesting.
effect of these 2 characters that these 2 characters have on each other.
Great. Well, I hope you make that film.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the first draft phase.
Okay.
It's almost complete. It's been quite an undertaking, but
I bet.
hopefully that's going to be the big next project.
Well, good. We'll look for that. We'll have you back here if you get into that, or even if you get your feet under Emergence and get that going.
Absolutely.
We'll have you back in here. But we're going to have to stop now. And I want you to do, before you go, so people know who you are and where to find you and your films, is look into your camera and give them your contact information.
Awesome. You can contact my company, Musa Creative. It's www.musacreative.net, and you can email us at info@musacreative.net.
Terrific. All right, I want to thank you for being here.
Thank
You're
you for
our
having me.
first cinematographer, and filmmaker in that sense, where that's the emphasis on cinematography. But I know from a lot of people in independent film, you have to be jacks of all trades.
Absolutely.
And Jills of all trades.
Mm-hmm.
So again, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's another one of our Paul Stefan shows with local filmmakers. So until next time, we'll see you.
You're watching The Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.
Dantini, what can I say? Well, he was for many years, 15 years or so, maybe longer, he performed at a place called the Peabody Bookstore and Beer Stube.
The great Dantini. His name was Vincent Circus, not spelled like circus show, but Cirkes. Polish background. His mother spoke no English.
And he just became this character. Well, he was a character. He grew a long white beard. He looked a little bit like Noah or whatever it is. But he was an excellent, and I mean excellent, sleight of hand artist. Now, I saw his act numerous times.
He did a very small magic act, we would call it. He could carry it all in a box with ropes and rings and things that you could, very small. But he was a skilled sleight of hand artist, I would say.
I'll never forget, he would come out and say, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a short intermission, at which time I will entertain you with a few magic tricks." But he would come out with his with playing cards. He would take a deck of cards and hold it like this here, and he could, with one hand, he could shuffle that deck of cards, and then he would take the cards and he would do what they call a ribbon spread. Take the cards and put them on his arm like this here, and then he would take his hand and go like this, and the cards would flip over this way, and then they would flip over that way, and then he would toss the cards up into the air like this and catch the whole deck.
Wow.
Like that, He also did, they called it the miser's dream, where he would have these coins, but he would take the coins, toss them up in the air, and they would vanish. He would do that. Then he would proceed, he would catch them out of thin air. Doop, boop, boop. He had one effect in his show. He had one audience participation effect, and he brought out like an amber colored, it looked like a scarf of some sort. And he would get a young lady up to help him, and he would take the scarf and wrap it around her neck. Then he would say, "Now get ready," and he would act like he was going to pull it. He goes, "Uh-oh, something went wrong." And then he would pull it right through her neck. He would
Wow.
do that, yeah.
How long did he perform in Fells Point?
Well, see, he moved around a lot. He had a wide career.
Okay.
I mean, his whole living was from magic, I could tell you that. Went to New York. He was a professional amateur on shows. He would do that. Dantini was in several movies. One was called, was it The Great Variety? That was the one. That was one of his better films. That was the one where you actually see him do his sleight of hand act. And actually, it's a very artistic movie, but he made these other films, and some of them were not very good. He was quite talented, he did midnight ghost shows with McCarl Roberts for years.
I worked with him in a thing called a spook show.
Okay.
Because he had the contacts. We worked through a theatrical agent who booked the theaters every Friday night for weeks after week. Dantini did his same 12-minute act, and my wife and I, and sometimes another female assistant, would do the better part of the show with the illusions.
So when we had our magic collectors group, I remember we were up in, where were we? In Boston. That's where Carl gave his talk about Dantini, and absolutely killed with that lecture. And people said that was the greatest lecture on magic they had ever heard. It was about Dantini. And again, he never made it big time, but he still made an impression with a lot of people, you know.
Now, obviously, Dantini's no longer with us, but what, towards the end of his life, when was he still performing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was performing up until the minute he died.
Really?
Yeah. He died in 1979. And so what happened was he was at the Peabody bookstore, and while he was sitting at the table waiting to go on, he just fell over. And that was it. Yeah. You know, for weeks after that, it made the headlines.
Wow.
Dantini died. So when he died, some friends of his at one of the bars, there's a little plaque. It's in the little park area right outside of Bertha's. And if you look down on the ground, you'll see it.
Godzilla. To some, it's an old movie about a guy in a rubber suit stomping around a cardboard city. To others, it's a new movie about Walter White fighting CGI monsters. But to the people who created Godzilla, it's a visual representation of the pain and fear that came out of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. You see, the stories a culture creates are a window into that culture's history. They hold more than just some monster stomping around a city. They hold history. This episode, I head back to Jeppy's to take a look at just that. Let's go. What is important about remembering and being able to see the history of comics and pop culture? What can people glean from that?
Well, there's a whole bunch of things they can glean. There's a change in narrative style, there's a change in artistry, the way things are illustrated, the things that are focused on. It's interesting to see what sticks and what doesn't, and how things change in an illustrative style over time.
It seems like comic books and pop culture are almost a barometer for the people of the time, their concerns, their hopes, their fears.
Well, that's basically true with most of the entertainment medium, that comics and media, they show what we are at a given time, and then they become indicators of where we've been. It's like a touchstone to like a wider memory experience.
Want to know what was trendy or hip during a period of history? Just look at the television shows it produced. You're safest if you stick with shows that were contemporary to the time, kind of like I Love Lucy, Seinfeld, or Sex and the City. You can learn what clothing was in style, how people wore their hair, even social norms and cultural trends. So next time you're caught watching old episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer instead of doing your homework, just say you're doing research on how bad people dressed in the 90s.
This case is dedicated to science fiction materials from 46 to 60. Basically what we're talking about here is a time in American history where science was both the benevolent benefactor and the evil villain all wrapped in one. So you had science as the destruction of all because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but then you also have the science of space travel. Sputnik goes out, circles the globe, people are suddenly clamoring for outer space Western travels.
One of the best ways to track the fears of a culture is to look at the horror stories it produces. Take Dawn of the Dead. It's a reaction to the zombie-like state consumers get in the mall. But it didn't just start with horror films, it dates back farther, a lot farther. Grimm's Fairy Tales. Published in 1812, it's a collection of traditionally oral fairy tales told through the generations. But why were these tales told? For fun? For amusement? No! They were gruesome. They were told to scare kids, to keep them from doing the things their parents feared they would do. These stories arose from the fears of a society, from a fear for their children's safety. Horror hasn't changed since.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Now, why a book on zombies?
I kind of think of zombies as the horror westerns, where it's basically a bare-bone plot. You have a very simple thing, and I think zombie movies, particularly Romero's, are good in that fashion. And the other ones, like maybe a Fulci zombie movie, is more of like response to natural disasters. And it's mostly, I really have an interest in mob mentality, and zombies are the ultimate representation of that.
You see with like Romero's Dawn of the Dead, there was an underlying commentary on American culture of the time.
There's zombie films on Redbox every week.
Yes.
Netflix is popping a new one up all the time. Walking Dead is bringing in huge numbers. It's one of the most popular shows on television right now, and people are really responding to this. We just had Brad Pitt in World War Z.
Why do you think there's a resurgence of zombies in our culture?
There's a lot of biological warfare being talked about, especially since like anthrax in like early 2000s, and then Ebola and stuff like that, weaponizing diseases.
And I think with, sadly, a lot of instability in today's culture with wars, famine, stock market crashes, you name it, it's kind of how does humanity survive and go through the worst of times?
I think just with all the things that are going on around the world and all the different, possibilities people are wondering about, it's kind of like a common bond through everybody.
Movie t-shirts, comic book toys, video game art books. Our modern society is surrounded by character-based merchandise. But I bet you can't guess when it all started. Think about it for a second. No. Much older than that. Next episode on History at Risk, we find out the answer and a whole lot more. See you then.
Welcome back to Baltimore and the CFL Live Halftime Report. The Argos in Baltimore are the showcase for the first half, but now at halftime, a very special evening here in Baltimore. This stadium has been home to some great athletes over the years, of course, for the old NFL Colts and the Baltimore Orioles. And throughout this season, Baltimore will honor players from both clubs. And right now, they're honoring three of them right now. Art Donovan a moment ago. Now Lenny Moore, the great running back for the Colts.
On behalf of my family, to keep the tradition alive, my wife, my brothers and sisters, my friends, and all of you, thank you so very much.
Lenny Moore, ladies and gentlemen. Our third inductee is simply the greatest quarterback of all time. In 17 seasons with the Colts, he established 22 team records and 8 NFL records. He was the first quarterback to throw for over 40,000 yards. He led the league in TD passes 4 straight years. His 47-game stretch with at least 1 touchdown pass will last forever. The records keep coming, huh? He was the NFL most valuable player 3 times, All-Pro 6 times, and he played in 10 Pro Bowls, and he quarterbacked the Colts to 3 World Championships, and on July 28, 1979, was inducted into the Hall of Fame. He is the Golden Arm John Unitas. John, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be here. After a long absence, football is back in Baltimore. We thank Jim Spiros for that. And we also thank you fans. You're the one who receives the credit for supporting the team and hopefully will be successful throughout the years. My congratulations to Jim and to all of you. Thanks for your support over the years. Appreciate it.
John, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the first honorees for Baltimore's new Ring of Honor. John Unitas,
There's
Lenny
still
Moore,
more to come on the
and Art
CFL
Donovan.
Live Halftime Report. We'll hear from Art Donovan and John Unitas. John and Leaf will have halftime highlights. It's all coming up from Baltimore. Welcome back to Baltimore, where a very special ceremony was held at halftime of this football game. And joining me now, I got to say, as a football fan, this is a big thrill. Johnny Unitas, who starred here for so many years. It's got to be great to see football fans back in this stadium.
Well, it's great. I love to see it for the city and for the people. They've been starving for football for the past 10 years. And Mr. Spiros was strong enough to bring a football team in, a Canadian football team in here. And they're doing well, I think, at the gates, and they're playing well on the field.
You threw for a lot of yards in the National Football League. You've had a chance to see the CFL now. How do you like the passing game here?
Well, it's a lot easier. So I think it's fine. The fields are wider. It's more conducive to that type of football.
Do you think as a quarterback it gives you more options than 4 down on the narrow field would?
Well, you have 3 downs here. Of course, you have to produce on the first 2 downs, but your passing game is a lot simpler because most of the time you're throwing against single coverages, and you have more field width of the field to be able to run a lot different type of patterns than you would be with our operation.
Johnny, thanks for talking to us. Welcome home.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You wonder what Johnny Unitas might have been throwing footballs in the Canadian Football League on a field this big. He said it would be a little easier.
Well, I think he's right. There's bigger lanes to throw in, obviously, but I think a man of Johnny Unitas' stature would have had success anywhere,
Absolutely.
any league, at any time.
Hello, I'm Steve Darnall, the publisher of Nostalgia Digest, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore. Well done.
The Despotille is on my shore, Maryland, my Maryland. His torch is at thy temple door, Maryland, my Maryland. Avenge the patriotic roar that fleck the streets of Baltimore, and be the battle queen of yore, Maryland, my Maryland. Thou wilt not cower in the dust, Maryland, my Maryland. Thy beaming sword shall never rust, Maryland, my Maryland. Remember Carroll's sacred trust,
This concludes another day of live stream broadcasting from TV Free Baltimore.